Imprisoned for 5 years, still a boss upon return. 5 years ago, Feng was framed by his family and thrown into prison. His mother was also killed and everyone labeled him a criminal. Chapter 1, Return after 5 years. You, an ex-convict, want us to leave? Keep dreaming. This house has been ours for years. If you think you can kick us out, there's no way. Why didn't you just die in prison? How dare you come back here? In front of a single-story house, a middle-aged woman with a nasty expression stood with one hand on her hip, the other jabbing at the forehead of a young man. Her words were sharp and vicious, showing no regard for the rightful owner of the house. The young man being cursed at was Feng, once the owner of this very house. The woman was Liu Hong, a notorious shrew from the neighborhood and Feng's former neighbor. The reason she dared to speak so brazenly was simple: Feng had just been released from prison. He had returned with hopes of starting anew, only to be met with this humiliating scene. Listening to her venomous insults, a fire of rage ignited in Feng's chest. His expression darkened, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his flesh. Every word from Liu Hong felt like a dagger piercing his heart. Neither you nor your mother were decent people. That wretched woman seduced another man and gave birth to you, a bastard who wasn't he even allowed into his own family. No wonder you ended up in prison. Liu Hong's curses grew even harsher. She had always been jealous of Feng's mother, Chen Mai, whose beauty had made her the envy of the neighborhood. Over the years, she had spread countless rumors about her behind her back. Now that Chen Mai was dead and Feng had just been released from prison, she felt even more emboldened to spew her hateful words. Yes, Feng was indeed an illegitimate child. But his mother had not seduced his father. His mother, Chen Mai, had once fallen in love with Yi Xianxian, a member of the prestigious Yi family, one of the most powerful clans in the entire Nanling province. When Yi Xianxian came to Lianqing to expand his family's business, he had met and fallen for Chen Mai. However, the divide between their social statuses doomed their love from the start. Under immense family pressure, Yi Xianxian abandoned the pregnant Chen Mai, choosing instead to marry a woman of equal status from another powerful family. This left Chen Mai to raise her son alone in Lianqing, enduring countless whispers and scorn. As a beautiful widow with a child, she became the target of jealousy from many neighborhood women, Liu Hong among them. Yet, Chen Mai remained kind and gentle, never once engaging in disputes. She devoted herself to raising Feng. Under her guidance, Feng grew into an outstanding young man. He excelled academically, ranking first in Lianqing during his college entrance exams and earning a place in the province's top university. During university, he successfully founded his own company. By the time he graduated, his business had flourished, and his assets exceeded 1 billion yuan. At 23, he was already a rising star. The year before his imprisonment, the Yi family had approached him, hoping to bring him back into the fold. Even the Yi family patriarch had expressed interest in grooming him as the heir. Initially, Feng wanted to sever all ties with the so-called prestigious Yi family. However, his mother wished for him to reclaim his rightful identity. To honor her wishes, he reluctantly agreed. But his decision threatened the positions of certain individuals within the Yi family, and they orchestrated his downfall. Framed for crimes he didn't commit, Feng was sentenced to 5 years in prison. His mother, Chen Mai, was murdered in cold blood, leaving him with an unquenchable thirst for revenge. The thought of his mother's tragic fate made his heart ache. Now, hearing Liu Hong spit these words at him only deepened his fury. His veins bulged as he locked eyes with Liu Hong, his gaze as sharp as a knife. He spoke in a low, menacing voice. "Say that again." Liu Hong faltered. A chill ran down her spine as she saw the murderous intent in his eyes. Despite her bravado, she was still just a woman and Feng was a man rumored to have killed people in prison. She had no idea whom she had provoked. Yes, Feng had been in prison for 5 years. But she had no clue what he had experienced inside. After being framed, certain members of the Yi family ensured he had no chance of overturning his conviction. They piled dozens of false charges onto him: murder, arson, robbery, even stealing candy from children. His judgment document alone weighed over 10 pounds, and his case became a nationwide scandal. As a result, he was sent to the most notorious prison in the country, a place from which no one had ever come out alive. But not only did Feng survive, he encountered an extraordinary opportunity. An elderly prisoner, one of the most highly guarded men in the prison, took him under his wing. Over 2 years, Yifeng became a martial arts master. He then rose to dominance within the prison. Later, when foreign assassins infiltrated the northwest, the military personally requested his aid. With his bare hands, he slew countless enemies, beheading over 10 war god-level warriors. From that moment, his reputation struck fear across nations. He was later entrusted with training the elite forces of the military, personally creating an invincible unit, the Shinju Guards. Leading the Shinju Guards, he crushed countless external threats, establishing himself as a living legend. This was the true reason he had been able to walk out of that inescapable prison. The Yi family had thought they had buried him forever. But they would have never imagined that he would return stronger than ever, with power beyond their comprehension, and a burning desire for vengeance. Yifeng had seen the horrors of war. He had bathed in blood. His presence alone was enough to strike terror into people's hearts. Liu Hong instinctively stepped back, feeling a deep sense of dread. But then she remembered that her husband was inside the house. Emboldened, she sneered. HMPH. So what if I said it? You're just a bastard born from a whore. Slap. A crisp slap echoed through the air. Liu Hong's words were cut off instantly as her entire body flew through the air. Yifeng's strength had long surpassed human limits. Even though he had held back, the force of the slap was still terrifying. Liu Hong's grotesque face swelled up instantly, blood dribbled from her lips, and several teeth were knocked loose. Murder. The ex-con is killing people. Lying on the ground, Liu Hong was momentarily stunned. Then, realizing what had happened, she let out a piercing scream. Her voice was ear-splitting, akin to a blaring loudspeaker, and soon, the entire neighborhood came out to investigate. Yifeng. Why is he out? Wasn't he sentenced for life? How did he get out? Maybe he escaped from prison. We should be careful. The gathered neighbors murmured among themselves, eyeing him warily. What a waste of talent. He had such a bright future, yet he threw it all away. If he had stayed on the right path, he would have been wildly successful by now. Even if he's out, he's finished. With a criminal record, his life is ruined. Some sighed in regret. Just then, a gruff voice rang out from inside the house. Wife! Who the hell dares to bully you? A burly man stormed out, his gaze locking onto Yifeng. Seeing him, the man charged forward in a rage. You little bastard! You've got a death wish, huh? How dare you act tough in my house? Chapter 2. He escaped from prison. Yifeng looked at the person who came. He was not a stranger to this person. It was Liu Hong's husband Zhu Hai. A well-known gangster in the neighborhood, the type who bullies the weak and fears the strong, and hangs out in Lianqing bars and various entertainment venues all year round. With a few younger brothers under him, he calls himself a big boss, but in fact he is just the lowest level among the gangsters. As soon as Liu Hong saw her husband coming out, she started crying and pointed at Yifeng, saying, Husband, it was this bastard. He wanted us to move out and beat me. When Zhu Hai heard this, his face darkened. How dare this bastard act so rudely in front of his house? It is said that Zhu Hai has been following a boss in recent years and has made a lot of money, with an aura of a big brother. Yifeng's past crimes sound scary, but in the eyes of people like Zhu Hai, he is just a prisoner in a labor camp, so he naturally would not show any fear. It's just courting death. Zhu Hai took a quick step forward, swung his fist and punched Yifeng with a sneer on his face. In Zhu Hai's eyes, Yifeng seemed a little thin and was not someone who could withstand a beating at all. He was afraid that he could not withstand a single punch. The reason why he was able to gain some fame in the nearby streets was because he was ruthless enough and was good at fighting. It was also because of this that he was noticed by the gangster boss and became a small leader under him. Zhu Hai is the bully in this neighborhood. Yifeng is going to suffer this time. When the people around saw this, they all shook their heads, thinking that Yifeng would definitely suffer a great loss under Zhu Hai. Liu Hong looked even more smug. She knew her husband's true nature very well. If he hit someone, the victim would be hospitalized at best and disabled at worst. Yifeng sneered. How dare a piece of trash challenge him? You know, that time he was invited by the military to kill a war god-level warrior with just one sword on the northwest plateau. How could he take a mere Zhu Hai seriously? He moved his body slightly and dodged it easily, then reached out and slapped Zhu Hai in the face. Snap. Zhu Hai was knocked back a few steps by the huge force, leaving a red palm print on his face. Ju Hai steadied himself and suddenly became furious. He pulled out a dagger from his waist and rushed towards Yifeng with vicious eyes. "Wild boy, you are looking for death." Seeing the other party approaching, Yifeng sneered, cleverly grabbed the other party's wrist, twisted it hard, and Ju Hai's face froze. "R!" Ju Hai let out a shrill scream, mixed with the sound of bones breaking. The immense pain made his face twisted, and soon, beads of sweat the size of beans slid down his forehead. How is that possible? Ju Hai was in so much pain that he clenched his teeth. He couldn't believe in his heart how the other party could have such tremendous strength. Rubbish. Yifeng sneered and kicked Ju Hai away, and the latter fell heavily against the wall not far away. He fell to the ground with a thud, his body rolling back and forth as he groaned in pain. Everyone around was shocked. Even Liu Hong covered her mouth, unable to believe what she was seeing. Yifeng walked towards Ju Hai step by step. Although he had to endure great pain, Ju Hai was frightened and trembled as he asked, You, what are you going to do?" Before Yifeng could say anything, Liu Hong on the side showed her shrewish nature and shouted at the people around her. "Murder has taken place. The prisoner has murdered someone." When the people around saw this, they began to talk about it. "I didn't realize Yifeng was such a person before. I didn't expect him to be so cruel. Yeah, I heard that he was sent to prison for murder before, but I didn't expect that he would be released so soon." Soon people started pointing fingers at Yifeng, especially those gossipy women. Yifeng was too lazy to pay attention to what those people around him said. They were just pretending to be ignorant and were just fence-sitters. He turned around and said coldly to Ju Hai, "Now, move your things out of my house immediately." Although this house is located in the suburbs of Liancheng and is in a remote location, it is worth a lot of money. House prices have skyrocketed in recent years, and together with the land, it is worth at least several million. Who are Mr. and Mrs. Ju Hai? One is a gangster bully, the other is a rogue shrew. How can you give up the meat that is already in your mouth? Ju Hai endured the pain and looked at Yifeng with resentment. He had been in the underworld for many years and naturally knew some laws. Looking at the murderous young man in front of me, my heart was full of confusion. How could he come out so quickly? According to Yifeng's crimes, it will be difficult for him to see the sun of freedom in this lifetime. Could it be that the other party escaped from prison? An idea came to Ju Hai's mind, and then he became more and more certain that Yifeng had escaped from prison and returned here. Otherwise, how could a person who had committed murder and was sent to prison be released after only 5 years? Yes, he must have escaped from prison. As long as we report to the police, this guy will be dead. This was the first time he thought of reporting to the police to protect himself. He was a bully in the village and always bullied others. No one has been able to push him to this point. Wife, this bastard must have escaped from prison, report to the police immediately. Ju Hai gritted his teeth and spoke loudly to Liu Hong beside him. At this time Liu Hong also reacted, hurriedly took out her cell phone and called the police. "I told you, he must have escaped from prison. How could he be released in just 5 years after committing such a serious crime?" The people around were watching the fun and started talking about it, and they all agreed that Yifeng was a fugitive. Yifeng didn't say a word from beginning to end. He thought it would be a good idea to call the police, drive the family out, and return the house to him. That's exactly what he wanted. After Liu Hong finished the call, several police officers arrived at the scene shortly afterwards, including a middle-aged man and 2 young men. The middle-aged man was named Li Shi, and he was a police officer in the vicinity. He looked at Ju Hai lying on the ground with a hint of surprise. Ju Hai has been hanging around nearby for many years, and Li Shi is quite familiar with him. It can even be said that they are close friends, and there are often some unspeakable transactions between the two. When Ju Hai saw his acquaintance coming, he immediately pointed at Yifeng and shouted, "Chief Li, this is a fugitive, arrest him quickly." "Yes, he is an escaped convict. Look at what he did to us. Catch him now." Liu Hong pointed at Yifeng and shouted loudly, acting like a victim. The other party insisted that Yifeng was a fugitive who had escaped from prison and never mentioned the fact that he had occupied Yifeng's house. Upon hearing this, Li Shi became alert. Without asking any questions, he took out the handcuffs, stepped forward, grabbed Yifeng's arm and was about to handcuff him. "Come back to the police station with me," Li Shi said coldly. If the other party was a fugitive, he would have made a great contribution. Even if he was not, he had given Ju Hai face. Then just let it go. You won't suffer any loss anyway. Besides, the other party beat people in public, so he had sufficient reasons to detain Yi Feng, so he did not hesitate at all and wanted to arrest Yi Feng immediately. I'm not a fugitive. Besides, don't you want to ask what happened here? Yi Feng raised his hand to avoid the cold handcuffs in Lisha's hand, and his expression gradually became gloomy. He could see that this Lisha was obviously familiar with Ju Hai and wanted to take the opportunity to take him away and solve Ju Hai's troubles. What proof do you have? Lisha sneered. Yi Feng took out a release certificate from the package, handed it over, and said, "It is true that I have been in prison, but I have been released. You have no reason to detain me." Lisha glanced at the release certificate in his hand, and then said in a deep voice, "As expected, you are still vicious. You just got out of prison and you beat someone up like this. Why don't you come back to the police station with me? Cuff him and take him back." Seeing this, Ju Hai breathed a sigh of relief and was secretly happy. "Humph, you want to fight me? I'll kill you after I get inside." Seeing this, Liu Hong simply stopped pretending, stood up, pointed at Yi Feng and cursed, "Wild boy, let's see how arrogant you are." Yi Feng's face turned cold. The Lisha in front of him was actually in cahoots with Ju Hai. They were a pair of snakes and rats. Chapter 3. Don't come over here. Two police officers rushed up, revealing silver handcuffs, and reached out to grab Yi Feng, ready to handcuff him. Before coming out, Yi Feng secretly swore in his heart that he would never wear that thing again. He had such determination and strength, and he just made a feint and dodged the two men nimbly. Lisha frowned when he saw it. This was resisting arrest, and it was also a slap in the face of him, Lisha. "How dare you resist arrest?" Lisha looked at Yi Feng unkindly and said gloomily. "Hey, you want to take me to the police station without asking any questions? Do you think you can be reasonable?" Yi Feng sneered. "Court death." Lisha had no idea of reasoning with a prisoner. He took out the baton he carried with him and smashed it at Yi Feng. In his eyes, the other party was, after all, a young man with a thin body and looked frail, who would definitely not be able to withstand this blow. However, Yi Feng's patience with him had reached its limit. Instead of dodging, he counterattacked with thunder and kicked Lisha away. The latter screamed and flew out, then fell to the ground with a bang. He kept wailing and coughing up blood, his face was pale, and he was seriously injured by Yi Feng. Yi Feng's strength far surpassed that of the god of war. This kick only used less than 1,000th of his strength, otherwise Lisha would have fallen to the ground and died. Seeing this, the other two police officers rushed up and tried to knock Yi Feng down, but were easily kicked away by Yi Feng. This scene stunned the people around. They could not believe that the frail-looking Yi Feng could actually knock three people away at once. The other party was a well-trained police officer, which really shocked everyone. After all, he can't change his nature. He dared to beat up the police officer right after returning, revealing his brutal nature. He is not a good person. I don't know if the release certificate was forged. How can you just say it out loud for a murder charge? Liu Hong is right. I'm afraid he really escaped from prison. Some people were whispering, continuing to slander Yi Feng and doubting him. Yi Feng was a good kid before, he was always outstanding, I just don't believe he would kill anyone. Some people stood on Yi Feng's side and shook their heads to defend him. Yeah, Yi Feng is a gentle kid, how could he do something like that? He beat Ju Hai because the house was occupied. It was purely self-defense. And this sheriff is so unreasonable. He just comes here to arrest people. Some people also lowered their voices to support Yi Feng. Although these people thought that Yi Feng had done nothing wrong, due to their nature of seeking good fortune and avoiding danger, no one dared to stand up and speak for Yi Feng. First of all, Ju Hai is not someone you can easily mess with, and secondly, Lisha is not someone that ordinary people dare to mess with. They are all watching the fun with the mentality of less trouble is worse than more trouble. Ju Hai and his wife were even more stunned. They didn't expect that Yi Feng would even dare to hit a police officer. But after a while, they became ecstatic. Beating Lisha means going against the government. It doesn't matter whether Yi Feng gets out legally or escapes from prison this time. He will definitely go in again, and that will be exactly what Ju Hai wants. Once he goes in, the house will belong to him. As long as you wait until the demolition is completed and then take the demolition compensation yourself, it will be a confusing account from now on. No one can take a penny from him. Besides, Lisha is not someone who can be easily provoked. If this guy offends Lisha, it is hard to say whether he can survive. Thinking of this, Zhu completely forgot about the pain and revealed a sinister smile of triumph. Lisha was kicked away by Feng and felt humiliated. In anger and shame, he reached into his waist and took out a gun. He aimed at Feng and was about to pull the trigger, killing Feng completely. Feng's face darkened and he rushed forward quickly, stomping Lisha's hand holding the gun to the ground. Crack. R. The sound of bones breaking mixed with screams. Lisha's expression instantly became extremely distorted and his eyes widened. Feng had a blank expression on his face, his heart was calm as water. He turned his feet sharply again, and Lisha howled again. Their gun also fell to the ground. Under the guidance of the old man in the prison, Feng's strength has already reached its peak. Even if it is a god of war level, he can kill it with one blow. How could he be threatened by a small gun? Not only did the other party not ask any questions, he also took out a gun and wanted to hurt people. Feng was very angry and naturally showed no mercy. If Feng hadn't seen many familiar neighbors around and didn't want to kill people in public, Lisha would have been a corpse now. This scene made the people around even more horrified. They sighed and shook their heads. They didn't expect that Feng would even dare to hit the police chief. At the same time, I felt regretful. I thought he was released legally and had a new life, but it seems he is bound to go back to jail. Some people saw Feng being so cruel and sighed in a low voice, wondering how many people he had killed in the past, otherwise how could he be so cruel? Even Zhu was shocked. He was the one who caused this incident, and Feng might not let him go. Thinking of this, Zhu winked at Liu Hong and slowly tried to crawl into their house. Stay away from this inhumane killer for a while. How dare you attack a police officer? Quick, notify the police. Lisha yelled frantically at his two men. The two young police officers took out their cell phones in a panic and called the police station. Feng ignored Lisha, who was screaming like a pig being slaughtered. It would be better if someone of higher rank came, so that he could take care of the matter of his house. If the person who came was someone like Lisha who couldn't tell right from wrong, he wouldn't mind giving him a good beating. He turned and walked towards Zhu, who was trembling with fear. You, don't come over here. The voice was full of fear. Zhu could never have imagined that this gentle-looking, lean bastard in front of him could be so good at fighting. He started to get scared. He was the only one who made others tremble and kneel down to beg for mercy. He never expected that one day he would end up fleeing in such an embarrassing situation. Feng looked down at him from above, his lips curled up slightly, and said coldly, "What do you think? Are you going to move or not?" Zhu was terrified. He moved back a little and looked around. Seeing the neighbors pointing and talking, he suppressed his fear and shouted, "Why?" These words made Feng laugh so hard that he kicked him away. "Why do you ask me? It's my house, why do you ask me?" After saying that, he kicked him again. Zhu is not only a well-known gangster in the neighborhood, but also a well-known hard-working person. This place is about to be demolished. He would not give up his house easily. A few $1 million is more than many people can earn in their entire life. He was now filled with hatred in his heart. Why didn't Feng die in prison but came out to ruin his good deeds? Seeing Feng approaching, Zhu finally got scared. He thought quickly and said stubbornly, "Your mother sold the house to us back then. Do you want to take it back?" Feng frowned. This was impossible. If Chen Mai was selling their house, it was impossible for Feng not to know about it. Seeing that Feng didn't believe him, Zhu hurriedly said, "I still have the sales contract." "Okay, go back and take it out and let me see it. I want to see when my mother sold the house to you." Feng sneered. Zhu was delighted. It really worked. Fortunately, he had made preparations. He had heard that this place was going to be demolished, so he asked someone to forge a house purchase and sale contract so that he could get the demolition payment smoothly. I didn't expect that it would be needed now. Anyway, Chen Mai is already dead and the handwriting can no longer be verified. He got up in a panic, staggered into the house and took out the forged contract. Just at this moment, a black sedan stopped outside and several uniformed police officers walked over. "It's Director Zhao." Lisha's brows raised with a sinister smile on his face. He was determined to teach this kid a lesson this time. He would take him back to the police station and make him pay. Chapter 4, You Teach Me How to Do Things. Director Zhao. Seeing the person coming, Feng frowned and looked in the direction of the voice. He saw a middle-aged man in uniform with a gloomy face striding towards him. Although Feng didn't know him, what surprised Feng was that the other party was actually quite powerful and had reached the level of a soldier king. Of course, this kind of strength is amazing enough in the eyes of ordinary people, but to someone like Feng who can kill even the god of war with ease, it is no different from an ant. When Feng was in prison, he was invited by the military to train the Shenju guards. The weakest among them had reached the level of a soldier king, and some of the best had even reached the level of a god of war. Now the people he trained have scattered all over the country and are leading their own territories. Feng naturally would not take a man who was close to the strength of a soldier king seriously, but he was curious about what attitude the other party would have when he came here. If the other party is still someone like Lisha, he doesn't mind teaching him a lesson. Director Zhao, you are finally here. When Lisha saw Director Zhao, he quickly got up from the ground, bent down and bowed to greet him. He was a little afraid of Feng just now, but now when he saw the person coming, he suddenly felt confident. The man called Director Zhao by Lisha is named Zhaoan. He is no ordinary person. He was originally a member of the military special forces, but later retired due to an injury and became the deputy director of the Lianqing police station. Zhaoan looked at Lisha with a hint of disgust, then looked at his limp arm. As a military veteran for many years, he could tell at a glance that Lisha had a broken bone. He had been in the Lianqing police station for many years, so he naturally knew what kind of person Lisha was. But no matter what, beating a patrolman was a big deal. As the deputy chief of the police station, he couldn't ignore this matter, so he asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" "Director Zhao, this guy just got out of prison and wanted to occupy someone else's house. I came to deal with him, but I got beaten up instead." Lisha turned the tables and accused Feng of being the first to complain. Zhaoan was naturally not someone who could be easily fooled. He did not completely believe Lisha's words. He walked up to Feng and asked, "Just got out of prison?" Feng looked at him, his face calm, and nodded. "Officer, don't believe him. He is a fugitive. Take him back quickly. It would be best if he was shot." Seeing this, Liu Hong, who was standing by, showed her shrewish nature and started yelling loudly. She now wished Feng would die sooner so that no one would block her path to wealth. Seeing this, Feng handed the release certificate issued by Shili prison to Zhaoan. Feng. Zhao Anton was surprised. He was not unfamiliar with this name. Feng's case caused quite a stir back then, and he had also heard some rumors about it. When he looked down and saw that the certificate was issued by Shili prison, his face changed drastically and he looked at Feng in disbelief. Others may not have heard of Shili prison, but Zhaoan knows it very well. It is the most terrifying prison in Shenju. Located in the vast uninhabited area in the northwest of China, it is home to extremely vicious criminals and some martial arts masters. It is known as the death prison where even those who get infected with the virus can never get out. Back then, the unit Zhaoan was in was stationed in Shili prison, and in those 3 years, no one was ever released from there. When he saw the release certificate given by Feng, he couldn't believe that someone could actually walk out alive. Then he looked at Lisha's broken bones and felt relieved instantly. The young man in front of him was definitely not simple. There are many experts inside, and even those at the level of a soldier king may not be able to defeat the prisoners inside. Not to mention trash like Lisha. He repeatedly verified the release certificate and found it to be genuine and definitely not forged. Although he has retired for nearly 10 years, he is still very familiar with the special seal on it. Since the other party was released legally, he had no reason to arrest Feng. At the same time, he also looked up to Feng and no longer looked down on him as before. Lisha saw Zhaoan hesitating and looking at the release certificate in his hand again, and he began to feel anxious. "Director Zhao, you don't need to watch. This guy attacked a police officer. Just handcuff him and take him back to the station first." Zhaoan didn't like Lisha in the first place, and his face turned cold when he saw that he dared to point fingers at him. "How do I need you to teach me how to do things? Get out of here." Lisha was suddenly speechless and trembling, not daring to continue speaking. After seeing this, Feng's impression of Director Zhao improved a lot. At least judging from his attitude, he was not the same as Lisha Zhuhai and others. "There is nothing wrong with your materials. Zhaoan handed the release certificate back to Yifeng, and then asked, "What's going on with you guys?" Seeing Zhaoan asking, Yifeng hadn't spoken yet. Liu Hong hurriedly came up and complained, "Director Zhao, you have to figure it out. Not only did he want to rob our house, he also beat us up." Upon hearing this, Zhaoan looked up at Yifeng and was secretly alert. The prisoners held in Shili prison were all extremely vicious criminals. Not to mention hurting people, even killing people would not be a big deal. Upon hearing this, Yifeng sneered, "Liu Hong, we have been neighbors for many years. When did my house become yours? Humph, we still have the house sale contract that your mother signed back then. What's wrong? You don't admit it now. Hubby, show the contract to Director Zhao." With Zhaoan in charge at this time, Zhu Hai did not dare to act recklessly. He was at most a gangster in the neighborhood. No matter how powerful he was, he did not dare to act presumptuously in front of a deputy director. He hurried over and handed the contract to Zhaoan. Zhaoan looked at it carefully and found nothing wrong. There was Chen Mai's signature on it, and a bright red handprint was pressed on it. Zhaoan handed the contract to Yifeng and asked, "Is this your mother's handprint?" When Yifeng took it in his hand, he saw at a glance that the contract was forged and the signature on it was not his mother's signature at all. He has been tutored by Chen Mai since he was young and is very familiar with his mother's handwriting. Although it was 80% similar, he was sure that it was not his mother's signature. Yifeng threw the contract aside and said in a deep voice, "Zhu Hai, you are really good. In order to occupy my house, you actually forged a contract." "Humph, you said it was forged, so it's forged. It's clearly Chen Mai's signature on it," Liu Hong said with certainty. "Yifeng's mother has passed away, so there is no evidence to verify the handwriting. This is also the confidence of Zhu Hai and his wife. As long as the other party cannot prove that the sales contract in their hands is fake, their house will belong to them." Just as they showed their victorious smiles, Yifeng took out a letter from the worn-out bag on his back, handed it to Zhaoan and said, "This letter is from my mother. You can tell whether it is true or false at a glance." Chapter 5 Get Out. Upon hearing this, Mr. and Mrs. Liu's expressions changed slightly and they began to get a little nervous. Yifeng's mother passed away shortly after he was imprisoned. During that period, she wrote several letters to him, which he treasured and kept. The contents of the above letters were all written by Chen Mai herself, which is the best proof to verify the handwriting. With Yifeng's strength, there is no need to waste words with the other party. The matter can be resolved with just one phone call. However, he had just returned and did not want to attract the attention of potential forces for the time being, so he did not want to make a big deal about the current situation. He needs to find out everything about his mother's death and the people who framed him. "Director Zhao, please make the decision yourself." After finishing speaking, he gave the letter to Zhaoan. Zhaoan did not read the content of the letter, but only looked at the signature. When comparing the two, he found that the handwriting was inconsistent. He instantly knew that the contract was forged. "Huh, did you know that forging a contract is against the law?" Zhaoan immediately said angrily. He himself came from the military and had a straightforward character. He hated those who took advantage of others the most. It would be fine if he had this kind of personality in the army, but he would definitely not be successful in the officialdom. Therefore, for nearly 10 years since he changed his job, he has been sitting like a rock in his position as deputy director and has never moved. Seeing Zhaoan angry, Liu Hong panicked and immediately knelt down and begged, "Director Zhao, we didn't mean to do that. Please let us go." There was an uproar around, the wind direction changed, and everyone started to blame Liu Hong. I was wondering why Liu Hong ended up living in Chen Mai's house. She told us at the time that Chen Mai needed money for medical treatment and sold the house to her. I didn't expect it to be a fake. At this time, people around were talking about it. Liu Hong didn't care about her face at all and knelt down in front of Zhaoan and begged for mercy. Zhu Hai's face turned pale and looked very ugly at this time. He didn't expect that this wild boy still retained Chen Mai's handwriting. Faced with Liu Hong's pitiful appearance, Zhaoan looked indifferent and looked at Yifeng instead. He guessed in his heart that the young man in front of him was definitely not as simple as he appeared. He just observed Li Shi's hand and saw that his bones were crushed by a kick. The person who did it might be as powerful as a soldier king. Such a person, who has just come out of Shili prison, can solve the problem by himself. If he can't solve the problem, he can get rid of the person. If he wanted to, the couple would probably be physically destroyed tonight, and no clues would be found. The way he looked at Ju Hai and his wife gradually became somewhat pitiful. Yi Feng, we have been neighbors for more than 10 years, please be kind and let us go. We will return the house to you and move out immediately. Liu Hong keenly noticed Director Zhao's expression, and hurriedly knelt down in front of Yi Feng, grabbing his trouser legs and begging for mercy. Forging a contract constitutes the crime of fraud, and the amount involved is a house, so the crime is not a small one. Yi Feng showed a look of disgust, kicked her away, and said, "Move out quickly. As for how you deal with it, that's Director Zhao's business. I have no right to interfere." The next thing was very simple. Ju Hai quickly moved the things out of Yi Feng's house. Next to it was his original house, and he moved quickly, clearing it out in less than an hour. Li Shi didn't dare to say a word from beginning to end, and he almost hated Ju Hai to death in his heart. In the end, Zhaoan took Ju Hai and his wife into the car. Before leaving, the latter did not forget to look at Yi Feng with resentful eyes. Yi Feng took in all the other party's expressions, but he didn't take it to heart. They were just two ants. Li Shi was a little unwilling to accept that he was beaten like this, but the other party was not hurt at all. In the past, no matter how reasonable the other party was, they would have been taken back to the police station for handling. It was obvious that Zhaoan did this on purpose. "Director Zhao, this matter was not handled properly, was it? This kid hit me, which is considered assaulting a police officer, and you just let him go like this." Zhaoan raised his eyebrows, turned his head and looked at Li Shi, and said, "Get lost, you don't need to tell me how to do things." Li Shi gritted his teeth, but ultimately said nothing. He lifted the arm and left with the two police officers. If Yi Feng was an ordinary person, Zhaoan would definitely take him back today. After all, the crime of assaulting a police officer is not a small one. But the other party came out of Shili prison and his strength is not weak, so Zhaoan has to consider it carefully. He had been stationed in that prison before and knew the people inside very well. Even though it was filled with prisoners, it was definitely a place where hidden dragons and crouching tigers were everywhere. He was the first person he had ever seen who could stay in there for 5 years, survive, and walk out in good health. He couldn't help but become curious about Yi Feng. "Mr. Yi, this is my business card. If you need anything in the future, you can contact me." When Yi Feng was about to enter the house, Zhaoan came up and handed him a business card. Yi Feng was stunned, paused, took the simple business card and put it in his pocket. "Thank you for troubling you today, Director Zhao." Yi Feng grinned. He had a pretty good impression of Zhaoan. At least he didn't disappoint him in handling today's events. Don't hit a smiling person. Since the other party has extended an olive branch, Yi Feng has no reason to refuse. It's just a small matter. I hope you can behave yourself in the future. I'll leave first. These words are both exhortations and warnings. After Zhaoan finished speaking, he turned and walked towards the black car. With the roar of the car took Ju Hai and his wife away. After watching him leave, Yi Feng walked into the house he had not seen for a long time. Although Ju Hai and his wife have moved in for a while, the layout inside remains the same as before. It can be seen that although Ju Hai moved his things in, he did not live here for long. However, the belongings he and his mother left behind were no longer there, and the house became empty. Yi Feng lived here before he was admitted to university. It was not until he went to the provincial capital to attend university that he moved away from Liancheng and his home. This place carries too many memories for him, and every corner is his remembrance of his mother. In the hole on the kitchen, he seemed to see the figure of his mother from the past. Thinking of this, Yi Feng's eyes became moist and tears rolled down. His mother raised him alone and had suffered enough, but she died at the same time as he was imprisoned. Thinking of this, Yi Feng clenched his fists tightly, and a huge rage surged in his heart. "Yi family, I will make you pay the price." As hatred arose in his heart, a desire for revenge took over his entire body and mind, swallowing him up like a river or sea. "Xiaofeng, are you back?" An old voice sounded outside the door, interrupting Yi Feng's thoughts. Yi Feng regained control of his emotions, rubbed his eyes, composed himself, walked over and opened the door. An old lady in her 60s was standing outside the door. Chapter 6 Mother and Daughter. Sixth wife. Yi Feng said in surprise. The person who came was Yi Feng's neighbor, a woman named Liu who also lived in this alley. After Chen Mai separated from Yi Xianxian, Yifeng had just been born and Chen Mai's life could be said to be very difficult. At that time, Liu Po helped their family a lot and was one of the people Chen Mai had the best relationship with in the alley. Is it really you? Xiao Feng. When Liu Po saw Yifeng, joy showed on her old face and she hurriedly grabbed Yifeng's arm, as if she was seriously confirming it. Yifeng was raised by Liu Po since he was a child. Yifeng could see that Liu Po was really happy for him. Yes, Aunt Liu, come in and sit down. Yifeng helped Liu Po in and sat her on the sofa. After asking about her health, Yifeng asked Liu Po about his mother. It turned out that after Yifeng was imprisoned, Yifeng's mother went to the provincial capital. No one knew what happened to her. When she came back, she had lost a lot of weight. Then she became seriously ill and died a few months later. Yifeng knew without thinking that his mother must have gone to the Yi family. He could predict that those people in the Yi family would never let her go. I can even imagine the humiliation my mother suffered. His mother had always been in good health and had never suffered from any illness. Yifeng would never believe that she passed away because of a serious illness. What's more, this happened just after the Yi family came back, so this matter is inseparable from the Yi family. Yi family. Yifeng's originally calm mood was stirred up again. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails pierced his palms, but he was completely unaware. Tears flowed down his face again. Even when facing the prisoners in Shili prison, the foreign forces outside the Northwest Gate, and the God of War Masters, Yifeng had never been afraid of crying. But when he thought of his lonely and lost mother, he was overwhelmed with emotions and could no longer bear the grief in his heart. When Liu Po saw this, she was also heartbroken. What a good woman! She was delicate, elegant and gentle, how could she just be gone like that? Grandma Liu sighed softly and said, Xiao Feng, they have all left, and it's almost the new year. You should take some time to go and pay your respects to your mother. Yifeng almost forgot the time on his way back. It is now the 20th day of the 12th lunar month, and there are only 10 days left until New Year's Eve. Yes, I will go. Yifeng held back his tears. Then Liu Po told Yifeng the specific address of his tomb, which was in a cemetery in the western suburbs of Liancheng. Sixth aunt, when my mother passed away, were you the one who organized her funeral? Yifeng suddenly said seriously. Granny Liu shook her head and said, it was a pretty girl who came to do it. A pretty girl? Right. Does Liu Po know her name? Liu Po shook her head. At that time, she did not ask about the other party's identity. Yifeng sighed and did not ask any further questions. He then sent Liu Po out and prepared to go out to buy some things to pay his respects at the cemetery. Yifeng currently lives in the western suburbs of Liancheng, not far from the cemetery, only a few kilometers away. It was still early, just noon, and there was still time. He couldn't help but go over and take a look. He arrived at the cemetery and bought incense, candles and wreaths from a candle shop in front of the cemetery. Yifeng's mother's tomb is located in the center of the hillside of the cemetery. The view here is wide and you can enjoy the scenery below the mountain. According to Feng Shui, it is a tomb with excellent Feng Shui, which surprised Yifeng. In front of his mother's tombstone, incense and candles were still burning, there were some fruits and a wreath. Obviously, someone had just finished worshipping here not long ago. Yifeng has lived with his mother in Liancheng since he was a child, and he has never heard that he has any relatives there. Logically speaking, no one would worship his mother, and the scene before him made him feel very strange. He hurriedly looked down the mountain and saw people coming and going on the long road, many of them carrying tributes going up and down the mountain. It is now the end of the year and many people come to pay tribute to their relatives, but he can't see any clues. Yifeng was a little disappointed. He arranged the fruits he brought and lit the incense and candles. He wiped the tombstone clean, then squatted on the ground and looked at the black and white photo embedded on it. My mood sank to the bottom again, and a huge sense of sadness surged up, instantly drowning my body and mind. At this moment, he was like a lonely child, wanting to see his mother again, wanting to chat with her, wanting to listen to her nagging concern, but there was no chance anymore, never again. At this time, at the foot of the cemetery, a woman holding a little girl slowly walked towards a BMW. The woman was young and beautiful, with a slim figure, snow-white skin, long hair draped over her shoulders, and was wearing a traditional women's suit and trousers and a pair of sunglasses. The little girl was about 4 or 5 years old. She was pretty and had a pair of big clear eyes that were very cute. Her round cheeks made people want to pinch them. "Mom, are we going home?" The little girl lay on the woman's shoulder and spoke in a baby voice. "Let's go back. Xiao Ku has to go back after paying respects to Grandma." The woman opened the car door, put the little girl on the seat, touched the little girl's head, and showed a doting look. The woman walked to the other side of the car, opened the door, got into the driver's seat, took off her sunglasses, threw them aside, and was about to start the car. The little girl on the side stretched out her cute head, looked at the woman with her dark and clear eyes, pouted her little mouth and whispered, "Mom, others have moms, dads, and grandmas, why don't I have a dad?" The woman's hands on the steering wheel suddenly froze, and her heart was filled with mixed feelings, 3 parts sadness, 3 parts memories, and more hatred. She was stunned for a moment. When her daughter mentioned that man, even though she had been in the business world for a long time, she was still very excited and couldn't calm down for a long time. Back then, the Yi family framed Yi Feng with dozens of charges, including rape. They even arranged for their victim to identify the crime in court during the sentencing. Yi Feng had no way to defend himself and could only bear these false charges. When the news was broadcast, Liu Yingying realized that the man she had always loved was actually such a person. For this reason, she decided to break up and no longer forgive Yi Feng, but a month later, she found out that she was pregnant. When Liu Yingying wanted to find Chen Mai to inquire about the prison where Yi Feng was serving his sentence, Chen Mai happened to have died in the hospital. After Chen Mai's funeral, she still couldn't find the prison where Yi Feng was serving his sentence, but she finally decided to give birth to the child. As a result, she became the shame of her family and the laughingstock of the entire Lianshan. Unfaithful man. Ungrateful. Liu Yingying gritted her teeth and greeted the man with almost all the words in her mind. Then she stroked the little girl's head with her fair hands and smiled softly, "Your father has gone to a very far place." Chapter 7. I was wronged, do you believe it? The little girl blinked her big eyes and continued to ask, "Mom, when will Dad come back?" The little girl's clear eyes were full of longing. How much she wished to have a father. When she was in kindergarten, her classmates always said that she didn't have a father. She had no way to refute them every time and could only hide in the corner and silently endure the ridicule. How much the little girl wished she could have a father who would pick her up, lift her high and kiss her on the cheek every time. Liu Yingying saw the longing in her daughter's eyes and felt a pang of pain in her heart. She had asked this question countless times and she couldn't bear to extinguish her daughter's hope. He bent down, kissed the little girl gently, and said, "Your father will definitely come back in the future, and he will definitely bring many gifts for Coco." "Mom, is that true?" There was light in the little girl's eyes and her tender face was full of hope. Liu Yingying smiled bitterly, knowing that it was impossible. The other party had committed a heinous crime and was sentenced to life imprisonment. No one knew where he was serving his sentence. How could he come back? "Even if I come back, I will never forgive him." But she still comforted her daughter and said, "Well, how could Mom lie to Coco?" "Okay. We're home." "Well, Coco, listen to your mother." The little girl nodded obediently. As the roar of the car sounded, the car disappeared at the end along the winding road. Once a person passes away, no matter how much love you have, you can no longer express it, and all you can do is leave behind eternal regret. Yi Feng on the mountain knelt quietly in front of the tomb, like a helpless child, disheveled in the wind, at a loss. As powerful as he was, he never retreated a single step in the face of the enemy, but at this moment, he could no longer suppress his inner emotions and they poured out. He really wanted to tell his mother that he had not killed anyone and had not committed any heinous crimes. Not only did her son not sink into despair in prison, but he fought for his country, made great achievements, and made the enemy country tremble. He was still the son that she could be proud of. But his mother couldn't hear or see all this. It was unknown how long it took for Yi Feng to come back to his senses in the great grief. When he left, it was already dusk. There is no heavy snow in the south in winter. It seems that God has sensed Yi Feng's sadness. The cold wind, accompanied by drizzle, blows gently across the mountains, so cold that it is biting. Yi Feng pulled his thin windbreaker together, walked down the mountain in the rain, and walked down the mountain alone. Just like his future life, lonely and isolated, he moved forward slowly. When Yi Feng returned home, the sky had gradually darkened and lights were lit in the surrounding houses. Before I could even sit down, there was a knock on the door. Yi Feng ran to open the door, and a pretty girl came into his sight. Yi Feng was not unfamiliar with the girl in front of him. She is Liu Po's granddaughter, named Luo Yang. Her parents work in the provincial capital all year round, and she has lived with Liu Po since she was a child. She is now attending university in the provincial capital, the same university that Yifeng attended. From childhood to adulthood, Yifeng has always been a child with excellent character and academic performance. He has earned enough face for his mother and has always been Chiang Mai's proudest capital. This big brother next door has therefore become a role model and an idol-like figure in Luo Yang's heart. But he never expected that 5 years ago, the older brother he respected and admired turned out to be a murderer despised by everyone. At this moment, she had mixed feelings in her heart. She still couldn't believe that the brother who treated others kindly back then was such a cruel and vicious person. But the reality was before her, and she had no choice but to believe it. Thinking of this, she felt lost, sad, and a little scared. Yifeng was also stunned. It is said that girls change a lot when they grow up. It is indeed true. The little girl back then has become a graceful young lady now. Xiaoyan. Yifeng interrupted her thoughts and brought her back to her senses instantly. Brother Feng, my grandma asked me to bring you some food. Yifeng then noticed that she was holding some food in her hands, which must have been freshly prepared and was still steaming hot. Thank you very much. Yifeng did not refuse and took the food from Luo Yang. He had just come back and happened to be a little hungry, so he couldn't cook for a while. Would you like to come in and sit down? Yifeng smiled slightly, still so gentle, and with his handsome face, he always gave people a warm feeling. Luo Yang pondered for a while, nodded, and walked in stiffly. Please sit down. Yifeng said carelessly. Luo Yang has grown up and is no longer the ignorant little girl who always followed Yifeng around and asked him questions. She sat on the sofa, straightened her body, looked a little nervous, and looked at the boy next door anxiously. Even in her nationally renowned Zhonghai University, this brother is a legend, having started his own business in his sophomore year. By the time he graduated, he was worth nearly 1 billion. Before he went to jail, his company had already started preparing for an IPO. How could such an excellent person do such a bad thing? Luo Yang couldn't help but secretly look at Yifeng. After a prison sentence, he had short hair, and although he looked energetic, his rough white coat and wrinkled and torn pants showed how miserable he was. Yifeng didn't know about her little thoughts. He returned to Liancheng and only ate a few buns in the morning. He was very hungry after a whole day of hard work, and the food was delicious. He didn't care about his image and ate the rice in big mouthfuls, completely ignoring the strange look of Luo Yang beside him. Luo Yang pondered for a long time, and hesitated several times before finally asking carefully, Brother Feng, did you really do those things? Upon hearing this, Yifeng raised his head slightly, chewed the food in his mouth, swallowed it, and did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, do you believe it? Luo Yang lowered her head, pondered for a while, then raised her head, her eyes radiating spirit, and said affirmatively, I don't believe it. In her heart, Yifeng has always been an excellent person and would never do anything heinous. Besides, the Yifeng in the report was too absurd. He was not the brother he had known since childhood at all. But she still wanted to get Yifeng's affirmative answer. Yifeng smiled, then said, I was wrongly accused. When Luo Yang heard Yifeng's explanation, she felt relieved instantly. Joy appeared on her beautiful face, and her expression when looking at Yifeng became natural. I knew that you, Brother Feng, were definitely not that kind of person. It's rare to have someone who believes in you unconditionally, and Yifeng began to feel happy. Whether I am that kind of person or not, I will not harm you. Yifeng finished the last bite of rice, put the bowl and chopsticks on the table, and said seriously. Luo Yang smiled. Brother Feng, are you still hungry? I'll go back and get you some food. No. Yifeng smiled faintly. Well, I'll go back first. Luo Yang picked up the bowl and chopsticks and was about to go out. When she reached the door, she turned around and asked, Brother Feng, the new year is coming soon. How about you go out with me tomorrow to prepare New Year's goods? Yifeng wanted to refuse at first, but seeing that there was nothing around and that he really needed to buy some things, he readily agreed, okay, let's go out together tomorrow. Chapter 8, Still young back then. Although there is no heavy snow in the south, the weather is very cold, especially. It was after a drizzle, and it was so cold that it made people shiver. The house was empty, without even any bedding. I had been thinking of going out to buy a set of bedding. But Luo Yang came in at this time, brought him a set of bedding, chatted for a while, and then left in a hurry. At night, Yifeng fell into a deep sleep under the quilt that smelled of a young girl's fragrance. He slept more peacefully than any other time. The next day, Luo Yang came to Yifeng, and with her help, the two of them cleaned the house again. Although they haven't seen each other for many years, Luo Yang became much more cheerful after knowing that Yifeng was not the criminal that people around him said he was. I told him about my college life and some of his past experiences in school. It was like I had gone back 10 years and turned into a chattering little girl. It took more than an hour to clean the already shabby house, and even the air felt fresher. It's finally ready, brother Feng, let's go out and buy New Year's goods together. Luo Yang wiped the sweat from her forehead and said happily. Okay, I'll be out in a minute. Yifeng smiled slightly. The two of them began to tidy up simply. Luo Yang changed into a set of dry casual clothes and put on a coat, while Yifeng was still wearing the same shabby clothes. Yifeng didn't care about other people's eyes, rode his electric scooter and headed to Lianqing City. Yifeng's home was originally in the suburbs, not far from the city, only 2 or 3 kilometers away. The e-mule shuttled through the traffic and soon entered the bustling urban area. Lianqing is just a third-tier city in China. After several years of rapid development, the economy has changed a lot. High-rise buildings are springing up everywhere, and business is booming. It is not inferior to second-tier cities and has attracted many well-known domestic companies to invest in recent years. Before Yifeng was imprisoned, he was very optimistic about the development of Lianqing. At that time, he had already put the investment plan for Lianqing on the agenda, but he was thrown into prison before he could implement it. Looking at everything in front of him, it was proved that Yifeng's vision back then was correct. His judgment on business foresight was one of the basic elements for his entrepreneurial success. Back then, it was precisely because Yifeng was indeed a business genius that the old man of the Yi family intended to train Yifeng to become the successor of the Yi family. Unexpectedly, all this brought him a huge disaster. The family struggle caused him to be imprisoned for 5 years. If it weren't for the old man in the deepest part of Shili prison who intentionally trained Yifeng, allowing him to possess strength far beyond that of a god of war and then make great military achievements, he would definitely have no hope of seeing the light of day again now. As soon as we entered the bustling urban area, Luo Yang behind us suddenly said, "Brother Feng, can you accompany me to school?" Yifeng was stunned, but did not object. He then asked, "What are you going to school for?" "I want to go see my former high school homeroom teacher." Luo Yang said softly. "No problem. Which high school did you graduate from?" It's your alma mater, Lianqing Experimental Middle School." Luo Yang works very hard and her grades are not bad. She has always taken Yifeng as her role model and has dreamed of studying in an experimental middle school since she was a child. Later, she was admitted to this school with excellent grades, but Yifeng had already been in prison at that time. After hearing what Luo Yang said, Yifeng hesitated a little. In fact, he didn't want to go over there. He was afraid of seeing his former teacher. Now, his crime has not been cleared yet, how can he face his old teacher? Perhaps back then, he was someone that his teachers could be proud of. Now, it would only bring shame to them. Seeing Luo Yang's eager eyes, Yifeng decided to send her there, but he still said, "Xiao Yang, I can send you there, but don't tell the teachers who are familiar with me that I'm back." "Why?" Luo Yang asked in confusion. Yifeng smiled bitterly and said, "With my current status, what can I say to those teachers?" Luo Yang pursed her lips, knowing Yifeng's concerns, and agreed, "Okay." The two came to Lianqing Experimental Middle School. Yifeng let Luo Yang go in first, and he parked his electric car at the door. Originally, Yifeng had no intention of going in, but when he looked through the door at the playground inside, he seemed to have returned to those youthful years, and a feeling of longing arose spontaneously. He walked inside involuntarily, and the security guard at the door had a new face. He is a kind middle-aged man, no longer the stiff and stern old man he used to be. Seeing Yifeng coming in, he hurried over to stop him and asked, "Who are you and what are you doing in there?" "I'm with the girl just now. I was also a student here before. I want to go in and take a look at my alma mater," Yifeng said with a smile. The security guard took a look at Yifeng and just noticed that Yifeng was with Luo Yang. His expression immediately became much better. As the year draws to a close, many people who have graduated here will come back to take a look at the school and visit their former teachers. So it was not a strange thing. The security guard did not make things difficult for Yifeng. He made way for him and let him go in. After Yifeng walked away, the security guard looked at his back and sneered, "People only come back to school to visit their teachers when they are successful. How can a person riding an electric bike and wearing shabby clothes follow their example and go back to school?" Yifeng naturally heard the sarcastic words coming from behind him, but he didn't care. There was no point in arguing with such a person. A few years have passed, and the school has not changed much. In front is a grand teaching building, in the center is a huge playground, and on the left are the dormitory buildings for teachers and students. Every place here bears traces of the youthful years, and one seems to be able to see the figures chasing each other back then on the playground. Time flies, and 10 years have passed in a flash. The scenes of those years flowed through Yifeng's mind like a camera, and each one was so worth remembering. The youthfulness remains, but things and people have changed. The only change in the entire school is the addition of a brand new teaching building, which he single-handedly funded with 10 million yuan after he graduated from university. Although the school is on vacation, there are still quite a few people in the school. They are all people who have returned to school to relive the memories. These are people who have made remarkable achievements in society, as can be judged from the various luxury cars on the playground. In the teachers' dormitory building, people were coming in and out in groups, and in the teaching building and the cultural corridor, people were marching in groups of 2 or 3. Yifeng unknowingly came to the school bulletin board in the cultural corridor. His former school was very proud of him as a gifted child. The bulletin board was filled with his promotional photos and the story of his sponsorship of the teaching building. Now there is no trace of him, only some publicity for the school and introduction of some outstanding students. At this time, behind Yifeng, several pairs of men and women came. The men were of extraordinary imposing manner and the women were dressed fashionably. Chapter 9 Funding. These people have all achieved considerable success, and they are filled with emotion when they return to their alma mater. "Qingqing, I heard that you have been doing well in recent years. You bought a house in the provincial capital and also bought a new car." One of the women said enviously to a girl dressed brightly. "It's just a small achievement, it doesn't matter." The young girl named Qingqing spoke modestly, but her expression was full of pride. She is a well-known anchor. Now that the short video industry is on the rise, she has become an internet celebrity with millions of fans through her own efforts. She really has reason to be proud. "Qingqing, don't be so modest in front of us. I heard that the school recently rebuilt the teaching building, and you donated 1 million to the school." The men among them also hurriedly flattered him. "What is this?" The girl named Qingqing smiled slightly. "It's nothing. I guess I can be ranked on the school's donation list." Others joked. "Compared to the genius student in our school back then, he is nothing." When everyone heard this, they all looked surprised. That person was indeed a genius and the pride of the school. He was an excellent student in high school, and had successfully started his own business while in college. By the time he graduated, he was worth hundreds of millions and donated a teaching building directly to his alma mater. It shocked the whole Liancheng at that time. Qingqing still remembers how grand it was when the other party returned to school. With banners hung, red carpets rolled out, and a student guard of honor organized, giving a warm welcome, what a grand occasion it was. How many students in this school have regarded him as a role model for learning? Qingqing still remembers that when she was a member of the welcoming guard of honor, she saw him from afar and her heart was moved. Then she sighed deeply. Later, when she was in college, she heard that the other party had been imprisoned for such heinous crimes that there was almost no chance of him seeing the light of day again. "It is said that the senior has been imprisoned," a boy said with a mocking tone. "Yes, I heard that he committed a serious crime and there is almost no chance of him getting out. In the past, his glorious deeds were on our school's bulletin board, but now almost all traces have been erased. He is no longer someone the school is proud of, but has become a disgrace that everyone despises." At this time, Yifeng in front heard what the few people said. He naturally knew that the shame they were talking about was himself, so he pricked up his ears and listened. At this time, the girl named Qingqing frowned and said, "Don't talk nonsense." A man sneered and said, "Qingqing, don't disbelieve it. It was all reported on the news." Qingqing knew it of course, but she relied on her intuition that the handsome, confident and calm senior was not that kind of person. Over the years, she still couldn't believe it. How could such an outstanding senior suddenly become a murderer? Perhaps, it was because of my admiration for him back then that I was unwilling to accept such a cruel reality, which gave rise to this illusion. Okay, don't talk about him anymore. No matter what, he has made great contributions to his alma mater. Qingqing said calmly. Qingqing, I know you used to admire this senior, but it is an ironclad fact that he committed heinous crimes. One of the young men said deliberately. Qingqing tried hard to move her lips, but she didn't say anything and didn't continue talking. A girl at the side knew that Qingqing's concern had been touched, so she quickly changed the subject and said, Don't talk about this, Qingqing. I heard that a senior is going to donate 8 million. Do you know who it is? Qingqing shook her head and said, I don't know. I just heard that she opened a cosmetics company and it's very successful. She was in the same class as that senior. At this moment, Feng couldn't help but stop, as the people behind him were also chatting intently. The girl named Qingqing was caught off guard and bumped into Feng. Feng turned around and saw a man with an angry face, looking Feng up and down. He was wearing white and worn clothes. Although he looked tall and handsome, he was obviously a poor man. He shouted angrily, Don't you have eyes? Feng raised his eyebrows, then said calmly, It seems that you are blind. You? The man was about to explode when he turned around and looked at the young girl named Qingqing, who frowned slightly. The man suppressed his anger and said coldly, You are doing so badly, and you still have the nerve to go back to your alma mater. Feng also retorted, It's none of your business how well he does. Besides, this is not your family's private property, so it's not your business to manage. You? The man was speechless and felt humiliated. Just as he was about to get angry, the girl named Qingqing came up and apologized, I'm sorry, senior. We were rude. After saying that, he glared at the man fiercely and his expression turned very ugly. The man immediately shut up and dared not say anything else. Feng had a very good impression of the girl named Qingqing. At least when they were talking about themselves just now, he didn't have much prejudice. I came here and didn't want to cause any trouble, so that those familiar teachers from the past wouldn't come out to laugh at me. So he smiled and said, It's okay. After saying that, he turned around and left, leaving Qingqing in a daze. This senior looks very familiar. Qingqing said in a low voice. Humph, he's just a loser who's not doing well. He looks like Feng, the senior who sponsored the teaching building. Then Qingqing shook her head again. She had only met Feng once that year and her memory had long been blurred. How is that possible? He's already in jail and it said he'll never be released from prison again. How could he appear in school? Feng was just an episode, so they didn't take it too seriously and quickly moved on to a new topic. After leaving here, Feng strolled to the other end of the playground, which was very close to the teacher's dormitory building. He didn't want to stay any longer and was about to leave when a childish voice came over, shocking him. Dad. Hearing this, Feng looked down and saw a delicate little girl of about 4 or 5 years old pulling at his trouser leg. The little girl was very cute, looking up at him with her big round eyes. The latter was stunned. How could someone call him dad? He squatted down with interest, showing a gentle smile, looked at the little girl, and asked curiously, Why do you call me daddy? The little girl tugged at Feng's trouser legs tightly, and said with a childish look, I've seen dad's photo. You are my dad. The girl in front of me is the little girl of the mother and daughter at the foot of the cemetery yesterday. Feng didn't know that 5 years ago, when he was in prison, Liu Yingying was already pregnant with his child. And she gave birth to the child, the little girl with the sweet voice in front of you. Feng smiled bitterly. It would be great if he had such a lovely daughter. Chapter 10 I'm not your father. Feng couldn't help but pinch her chubby cheeks, touched the little girl's head, and said seriously, I'm not your father, where are your parents? Feng looked around and didn't see any adults. The teacher's dormitory building was on one side. He guessed that this must be a teacher's child who had mistaken him for someone else. The little girl said seriously at this time, You are my father. You look exactly like my father. It turned out to be true. The child's cognitive ability is still poor and he probably mistook Feng for someone else. At this time, Luo Yang ran down from a dormitory building, saw Feng, walked over and said, Brother Feng, aren't you not coming in? It's okay, there's not many people here, I just came in and took a look around. Who is this little girl? She's so cute. Luo Yang saw the little girl next to Feng, and after she finished speaking, she squatted down and touched the other's head. The little guy seemed a little shy and shrank behind Feng. "Brother Feng, whose child is this?" Luo Yang asked. Feng was also confused now, and shook his head and said, "I don't know either. I just came here and she called me dad." "You are my father." The little girl pursed her lips and said seriously. Feng smiled bitterly, squatted down, touched the little girl's head and said, "Okay, go find your parents quickly, uncle is leaving." After saying that, he prepared to leave. He didn't want to stay here any longer, for fear of seeing the familiar teacher. But the little girl had no intention of letting go. Tears welled up in her eyes and she said pitifully, "Daddy, please don't leave Coco, okay?" Feng couldn't bear it, so he squatted down slightly and said gently, "Uncle is not your father, go back and find your parents." After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave, but the little girl's hand was still tightly holding Feng's trouser leg. Feng was about to leave, but the little girl finally let go of her tender little hand and watched Feng walk out of the school gate with reluctance. "Yingying, I thank you on behalf of the school." Two figures walked out of the dormitory building. One was Liu Yingying, and the other was a woman who was nearly 50 years old and wore a pair of thick glasses. "Teacher Chen, what are you talking about? The school has nurtured me, so it's only natural for me to make some contribution to the school." Liu Yingying wore an exquisite suit and a down jacket today, but it still couldn't conceal her charm. The teacher's name was Chen Qin. She was Liu Yingying's homeroom teacher at the time and also Feng's math teacher. Liu Yingying returned to her alma mater this time, preparing to fund the school to build a teaching building, and the discussions between the two were nearing completion. At this moment, the little girl saw Liu Yingying and ran up to her in a hurry, crying, "Mom! Dad doesn't want me anymore." When Liu Yingying heard this, her heart ached. Recently, the child had been always yelling for his dad, which gave her a headache. Thinking that she missed her father again, he quickly picked up the little girl, wiped the tears from her cheeks, and said softly, "Don't cry, little Coco, you are so cute, how could your father not want you?" The little girl sobbed and said, "I saw my father just now, and he didn't want Coco." When the little girl thought of this, she cried even more sadly. "Coco, don't talk nonsense. Dad went to a very far place. How could you see him?" Liu Yingying felt a pain in her heart, and suddenly she thought of the man who made her love and hate him. Seeing her daughter crying, the hatred in her heart increased a little bit. Chen Qin on the side naturally knew that Liu Yingying's child was the child of her most outstanding student back then. Because of this, Liu Yingying suffered countless cold stares and attracted a flood of criticism. Thinking of that student back then, I sighed deeply in my heart. Once upon a time, he was the pride of the school and the pride of his teachers. Every time he talks with teachers from other schools, he can become a topic of conversation that he is proud of. He was like a falling meteor. After shining brightly for the most time, he fell and dissipated at a very fast speed, and finally became darkness. When Feng was imprisoned, they all thought that Feng was wrongly accused. Many of their teachers were also present in person at the trial, but the evidence and witnesses proved that the student who once had excellent grades and a gentle character had eventually gone astray. Thinking of this, she sighed deeply with regret, forced a smile and said to Liu Yingying, "Yingying, the matter is almost settled. You can comfort the child. I will go discuss it with the principal first." "Okay, Teacher Chen, take care." Chen Qi nodded, then walked towards the office in the teaching building. Liu Yingying picked up the little girl and said softly, "Don't cry, Coco, Mom will take you to eat something delicious." "Mom, I didn't lie to you. I just saw Dad," the little girl said stubbornly. Liu Yingying smiled bitterly. She had been looking for him for so many years, but there was no news at all. How could he be here? Maybe the child wanted his father so much recently that he got the wrong person. But in order to coax her child, she pretended to be serious and said, "Mom believes in Coco, Dad will be home soon, Coco, don't cry." The child was innocent, and after hearing what Liu Yingying said, she stopped crying and asked in a low voice, "Really? Well, when did Mommy ever lie to you?" Liu Yingying smiled slightly. "But before Dad comes back, you have to grow up a little so that Dad will like you." "Okay, I will eat lots of food, and my dad will definitely like me." "Okay, let's go eat." Liu Yingying picked up the little girl and walked towards the BMW parked in the playground. The car turned around and drove out of the school. At this time, several people marching on the school playground noticed Liu Yingying, and one of them pointed at the disappearing car. This woman is not simple. Who is she? Someone showed off his knowledge and said, she is the eldest daughter of the Liu family in Lianshan, the chairman of Minxi Company, and her name seems to be Liu Yingying. So it's her. The cosmetics we use are produced by their company. Several girls cheered. I didn't expect that she is actually our senior. I should have gone up to say hello and made myself familiar with her. Several girls regretted it. You may not know this yet, but this time the school is raising funds, and many people who have left here before will come back and donate enthusiastically. And this Liu Yingying is said to have already secured 8 million in funds, ranking first. Several people took a deep breath. They didn't expect it to be such a big deal. It is said that after the new year, the school will hold a formal fundraising ceremony to publicize the contributions made by these former outstanding students to their alma mater. A successful person like her will be a shining star in the whole school. While a few people were chatting, Feng had already left the school. He didn't have the energy to pay too much attention to these things. I accompanied Luo Yang to the largest shopping mall in Lianshan, preparing to buy some New Year's goods to take back. Chapter 11 Encounter. Feng drove Luo Yang to Lianshan Plaza, the largest shopping mall in Lianshan. The shopping mall is located in the most prosperous area of the city center. It is very large, with 5 floors. A large leisure commercial plaza integrating supermarkets, clothing and electronic products. The prosperity here is no less than that of the commercial plazas in first and second tier cities. Even high-end luxury goods have opened many brand stores here. It was the end of the year and the shopping mall was crowded with people. After Feng parked his electric bike, he went in with Luo Yang. The things inside were not cheap. Luo Yang was just a student who had just entered college. She did not have much money and could not afford the high-priced items. So the two of them went directly to the supermarket to buy some items needed for the new year. Although the quality of this place is not low, the things in the supermarket are not much different from those outside, which is also the main factor that causes the large flow of people in the mall. It took the two of them an hour to buy a lot of things, which were carried by Feng. Brother Feng, shall I take you to buy 2 new clothes for the new year? Luo Yang was in a good mood, jumping and skipping in front like a little deer. Feng looked at the clothes he was wearing, and they were indeed very worn out. When he was in high school, he would wear the same clothes for several years, so he didn't think it was a big deal and didn't feel inferior. Many times, a person's self-confidence does not come from appearance, but from strong strength and profound knowledge. However, if he had the conditions to purchase it, he would naturally not be stingy, so he nodded. The two took the escalator up to the 3rd floor, which was the clothing area, where all the clothes were sold, including some luxury stores. Now that it is the end of the year, many people who are not short of financial resources will come here to buy fashion. Most of them are young people, including some bold bosses, who walk in and out with pretty girls, flirting with them. Luo Yang brought Feng to an inconspicuous clothing store, which was neatly and luxuriously decorated. The shop is not big, only about 40 or 50 square meters, but even so, the rent for a shop like this costs tens of thousands of yuan a month. It can be said that the entire huge shopping mall is a huge treasure pot, and the estimated value of this shopping mall has reached more than 10 billion. Along the way, based on his business acumen back then, Feng carefully observed the operating model of this shopping mall. This model is exactly the same as the planning model he made when he was planning to invest in Lianshan. I wonder what the company that he and his college roommate invested in has become now. It is estimated that the shares he held had been divided up the moment he was imprisoned. Thinking of that roommate, Feng's heart was filled with waves. One day, he would definitely take back everything that belonged to him. When I entered the store, it seemed a bit deserted. Compared with other busy stores, it could be said that there were almost no customers. The 2 beautiful female sales clerks inside had numb expressions and were doing nothing but trimming their nails and playing with their cell phones with their heads down. Feng and Luo Yang walked in, and a salesperson looked up with a happy expression. However, after seeing Feng's shabby clothes, his expression quickly dimmed. Seeing this, Feng was instantly relieved. How could the store's business be good with such a salesperson? But he didn't say anything. He came here to buy clothes, and as for the rest, it was none of his business. Another salesperson stood up lazily and said without interest, "Look for yourself." Feng and his companion walked to the clothes rack, carefully selected several styles, and compared the sizes. "Brother Feng, this one looks good. It makes you look sunny and handsome. Luo Yang picked out a few pieces and pushed Yifeng into the fitting room. After trying them one by one, Yifeng picked out 2 pieces, and the others were scattered on the hangers. Luo Yang was just about to clean them up and hang them up again. The salesperson at the side looked at him strangely and said in a sarcastic tone, "If you don't want to buy it, don't try it. It will be very troublesome to clean it up." Yifeng frowned, but Luo Yang said angrily, "What's your attitude? How do you know if it's suitable if you haven't tried it? Besides, isn't this all your job?" When the salesperson saw Luo Yang was angry, he also got angry and pointed at Luo Yang and said, "You didn't buy it after trying it on. I've seen many people like this. They don't have money in their pockets. They just come here to try on clothes on purpose, and then go online to buy the same ones. What attitude do you want from poor bastards like you? If you want to have a good attitude, why don't you go to the luxury store next door? But seeing how poor you are, you can't even afford the buttons inside." The 2 salesmen deliberately mocked Yifeng and the other man, not taking them seriously at all. They have been in this industry for a long time and are very good at judging what they are eating. Yifeng is dressed in rags and it is obvious that he is not a rich man. It was obvious that Luo Yang was a girl who had just entered college and had no purchasing power, so they dared to talk to them like that. Luo Yang was very angry. She didn't expect that she would have to endure such anger when she came to buy clothes. She was about to argue, but Yifeng stopped her and said, "Xiaoyan, don't pay attention to them." After saying that, he was ready to leave. In the past, Yifeng would not even look at such a small person, let alone argue with him. The 2 showed a smug look and continued, "See, my guess was right, wasn't it? We didn't plan to spend any money, we just wanted to try on some clothes." "What are you talking about?" At this time, a fashionably dressed woman walked in. After hearing what the 2 salesmen said, her brows furrowed and her face became gloomy. "Sister Wei." The 2 men who had been so arrogant just now lowered their heads instantly, and their momentum disappeared instantly. When the woman was about to scold the 2 of them, she saw Yifeng and was stunned for a moment, revealing a look of disbelief. You are Yifeng?" Su Weiwei. Yifeng never expected that he would meet an old acquaintance here. Su Weiwei was his high school classmate. They studied together for 3 years, and at that time she sat at the table in front of Yifeng. She was very beautiful and often slipped little notes to Yifeng to express her deep feelings. However, Yifeng did not accept her at that time, but their relationship was not bad. When the 2 salesmen nearby heard this, their hearts skipped a beat and their faces turned very ugly. "I didn't expect that this seemingly insignificant poor guy actually knew the boss lady." After a moment of surprise, Su Weiwei looked at Yifeng's shabby outfit and sighed in her heart. She had heard about Yifeng's imprisonment a long time ago, but she never expected that the most brilliant and proud boy in the past would end up in such a situation. But he immediately became confused. At that time, everyone said that Yifeng had committed a serious crime. How could he be released after only 5 years? "Haven't you already?" Su Weiwei hesitated to speak and ultimately did not ask. Yifeng knew what she wanted to say, so he changed the subject and said, "It's hard to explain, it's all in the past." She smiled slightly, and did not continue to ask, but said, "It's good that you came out safely. Do you want to buy clothes?" Yifeng nodded and said, "Well, is this store yours? After I got married, I have been running this shop here." Su Weiwei smiled bitterly. Yifeng sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that she was already married, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt relieved, as he was almost 30 years old. Time is unforgiving. Just pick the style you want and take it. It's a meeting gift from your old classmate. Chapter 12 Face. Su Weiwei said cheerfully. Yifeng did not refuse, but he also did not intend to take it for free. After putting the clothes he had picked out earlier on the checkout counter, he turned around and said, "Weiwei, your store doesn't look like it's doing very well." When Su Weiwei heard this, a trace of worry appeared on her face. In fact, the clothing store she ran was on the verge of closing. "We have already owed the mall several months' rent. If we don't pay the rent, our business will be cleared out and closed." She didn't know what to do in the future. When Su Weiwei was in college, she was madly pursuing Yifeng, but unfortunately Yifeng was already together with Liu Yingying at that time. After graduation, she was disheartened and chose a man to marry at random. She originally thought that it didn't matter who she married as long as it wasn't the person she loved. who knew that her husband was addicted to gambling and didn't care about the family at all. After giving birth to a son, she had to rely on running the clothing store to support the family expenses, and she felt very miserable. I could only smile bitterly and said, "To be honest, I'm about to go bankrupt. If you need clothes, just pick out a few more." Feng was not surprised. Just as he was about to speak, a few people came in from outside the door. They were wearing suits and uniforms and seemed to be mall staff. As soon as he entered the store, he said to Su Weiwei, "Ms. Su, your store has been in arrears of rent for several months. Today is the final deadline, and we are going to close the store." Su Weiwei's face changed, and she said to the staff of the mall in an almost begging manner, "Can you give me some more time? I will raise the money and pay the rent immediately." "No, I've given you plenty of time." The mall manager was tough and refused outright, not planning to give Su Weiwei any time. If the store was closed, Su Weiwei would be left with nothing. Her husband had already sold his house and lost all his money. Now the family of 3 lives in a rental house. Without the maintenance of this shop, she can't even pay the rent. She continued to beg, "Give me another month, and I will pay you the full amount of rent that I owe you." However, her pleading was somewhat in vain. The mall manager was unmoved and decided to close the store. He said to Feng and the others, "Get out quickly. We are going to lock it up." Upon hearing this, Su Weiwei's face turned pale and the light in her eyes dimmed instantly. At this time, a man in a suit passed by the corridor outside. Seeing the hustle and bustle of the store, he stopped and walked in. "Manager, why are you here?" Seeing the man, the mall manager hurriedly greeted him. This man is the general manager of the shopping mall. His name is Jing Guizhong. This grand commercial plaza was planned by him. When Su Weiwei saw Jing Guizhong, she didn't care about her dignity and hurriedly went up to him and begged, "Manager Zheng, please don't close my store first." Zheng Guizhong looked at the poor woman in front of him and knew that she had an incompetent husband who used to come to the store often to ask for money and caused a lot of trouble. However, the mall's operation was not very lenient, so he said to Su Weiwei helplessly, "Ms. Su, the mall has rules. A few months of tolerance is the limit. I have no other choice." He just finished speaking and was about to leave, but his eyes caught Feng standing beside him. He opened his mouth in shock, his eyes almost popped out, and said in disbelief, "Yi. Mr. Yi. Mr. Yi." The mall managers were shocked, and even Su Weiwei was shocked. Unexpectedly, Feng could actually shock the general manager of the shopping mall so much, and his address was full of respect. The Zheng Guizhong in front of him was an employee of Feng's previous company. At that time, Feng not only promoted him to become a senior executive of the company, but also gave him some shares. Seeing each other again at this moment, Feng smiled bitterly and said, "Old Zheng, long time no see. I am not Mr. Yi anymore." "No, you are still Mr. Yi in my eyes," Zheng Guizhong said excitedly. He will always cherish the memory of Feng's kindness in recognizing his talent and will never forget it. As for what happened to Feng later, as an internal employee of the company, he naturally knew that Feng's imprisonment was a complete injustice. It was all Feng's roommate, now the chairman of the company, who joined forces with the Yi family to deal Feng a fatal blow. But facing the Yi family, he, a small employee, was completely powerless and could only watch Feng go to jail. Seeing this, Feng nodded seriously and said, "I have nothing now. I am no longer the chairman of your board. If you think I still have some face in your eyes, please understand the situation of my classmate." Seeing this, Zheng Guizhong hurriedly said, "Mr. Yi, I didn't know Miss Su was your classmate. If you know, I will never embarrass her even if I die." After he finished speaking, he turned around and said to the mall managers seriously, "Waste Miss Su's previous rent, and don't embarrass Miss Su again in the future." Su Weiwei had originally been in despair. She didn't expect that the general manager of this shopping mall was actually Feng's former subordinate. One sentence helped her get through the difficult situation. "Originally, I wanted to help him, but he helped me instead. But when I think about it, Feng was so glorious back then. Even if he was imprisoned for 5 years, he would be worth a piece of gold when he came out. He looked down and out, so how could he be as miserable as he thought?" Su Weiwei's eyes were red, and she was so moved that she was speechless. She uttered a few words awkwardly, Feng, thank you." Feng smiled faintly and said, "Why are you saying that? It's rare that old Zheng is willing to give face to me, your old boss. You should thank him." "Thank you, Manager Zheng." Su Weiwei almost forgot about Zheng Guozhong standing beside her and quickly turned around to thank him. Zheng Guozhong was quite generous. He waved his hand and said, "Miss Su, you are too kind. It's just a small favor." Yifeng glanced at Zheng Guozhong and secretly sighed that he had not misjudged him back then. He found that he was a man of outstanding abilities, a kind person, and was grateful. "Mr. Yi. Mr. Zheng, this is not the place to talk. I'm going to chat with my old classmates first. I'll come to your office to find you later." Zheng Guozhong wanted to say something excitedly, but was interrupted by Yifeng. Zheng Guozhong forced himself to calm down, nodded, and said, "Okay, then I'll go back and wait for you." Yifeng nodded. Zheng Guozhong then took a few people from the mall away. Yifeng looked at Zheng Guozhong's back with a deep look in his eyes. Zheng Guozhong is a good breakthrough point. If you want to return to Yunfeng Group, you can't do without a sharp nail to open up the situation. But after all, I have been away from it for many years and I don't know what the company's internal structure is like now. Besides, Zheng Guozhong still needs further contact to distinguish his loyalty from his treachery. Yifeng is not a child. He has experienced the ups and downs of the business world and has seen too many intrigues and deceptions. Just because she waived a little rent for Su Weiwei, it doesn't mean that Zheng Guozhong is the same as before. Yifeng brushed away the thoughts in his mind, turned around and looked at Su Weiwei with red eyes, and said jokingly, "What's wrong, are you so moved that you want to marry me?" Su Weiwei came back to her senses, looked at the man who had rejected her countless times in the past, and said sadly, "Do you still want it if I give it to you?" Yifeng smiled awkwardly and quickly changed the subject. "Why don't you treat your old classmates to a meal?" Chapter 13. That man is sharper than before. "I'll arrange it." Su Weiwei rubbed her red eyes, smiled pitifully, and said cheerfully. Then she ran to pick up the clothes that Yifeng had picked out earlier, packed them herself, and held them in her hands. Under her leadership, they walked towards the dining area downstairs. Luo Yang, who followed behind, had her heart pounding, having not yet recovered from the shock. She would never have thought that Brother Feng, who had been in prison for several years, still had such energy after returning. Whether in high school or college, you can hear his legendary stories. I didn't expect that so much time has passed, but the story is still continuing. She followed silently. When passing by the electronics store downstairs, Luo Yang suddenly said, "Brother Feng, how about I buy you a mobile phone?" Yifeng was stunned. He hadn't used a mobile phone for several years. Now he only had a small satellite phone, like an old man's phone. Don't underestimate this phone. It is the only phone that can directly connect to the Shenzhouwei command center in various places. The military energy that can be mobilized is comparable to that of a commander of a large military region, or even greater. The Shenzhou Guards are the most elite troops in Shenzhou, stationed throughout the country. They have made great military achievements in recent years and are one of the top military units. The leader of the Shenzhou Guards is at least as powerful as a soldier king, and even more of them are at the god of war level. It can be said that they are intimidating to the world. Almost all of these people were trained by Yifeng himself, and among them were many veterans who had fought with him all over the world. He did not use the satellite phone in his hand easily when he came out. At the moment, he really needed a mobile phone, otherwise it would be very inconvenient. Yifeng nodded, and was dragged by Luo Yang to a mobile phone store to choose a mobile phone. He chose a mobile phone that cost more than 7,000 yuan, and when it was time to pay, Su Weiwei rushed to pay for him. "Weiwei, your store isn't doing well, you should keep it. I can still afford this little money." After saying that, he took out a stack of cash and gave the salesperson 7,000 yuan under his strange look. Although Yifeng had just been released, he had quite a bit of money on him. He had been in prison since the Northwest War. The military district did not treat him as a simple criminal. After sending people to investigate his case thoroughly, they found out that Yifeng was imprisoned wrongly. Afterwards, he went through the enlistment procedures and became a soldier. Otherwise, how could he be allowed to train the Shenzhou Guards and lead those soldiers to fight around? The military originally intended to clear Yifeng's name, but he felt that he had to avenge his blood feud with his own hands. For the purpose of protecting him, the military also agreed with his point of view, so Yifeng came back through the release procedure. Before leaving, the military originally planned to give him some money, but he did not accept it. He just asked to bring back a few tens of thousands of yuan to sustain his life. He can still afford a mobile phone that costs several thousand yuan. Seeing that Yifeng insisted on giving her money, Su Weiwei did not object. She was almost penniless now. All the money had been used to purchase goods and piled up in the store. I had thought I could make some money back before the new year, but business was so bad that I almost fell into despair. After buying the mobile phones, the three of them went to the second floor and found a pretty good restaurant. After sitting down, Yifeng said to Su Weiwei seriously, "Weiwei, you can't manage your store like this." Seeing that Su Weiwei didn't say anything, Yifeng continued, "The quality of the salesperson in your store is very poor. If this continues, it will not bring you any profit." Su Weiwei gritted her teeth, knowing that what Yifeng said was indeed true, but she also had her own unspeakable secret in her heart. Those two salespeople were not ordinary people. One was her husband's sister and the other was her cousin. She really didn't know how to deal with it. If she fired him, her husband would definitely make a big fuss, causing unrest in the family. This unhappy marriage life was the deepest pain in her heart. Yifeng had been through a lot, so how could he not see the worry in her face? He continued, "If you want to make some achievements in business, you must be ruthless. Any factors that threaten the survival of the store must be eliminated, otherwise you will have no choice but to accept the result of bankruptcy." Su Weiwei nodded seriously and said with a wry smile, "I will definitely clean it up properly this time." She knew that Yifeng was not an ordinary person. He started his business when he was a sophomore in college and was worth nearly 10 billion when he graduated. Naturally, he has rich experience in business. It can be said that his words are full of gems and can be regarded as classics. After Su Weiwei thought about it carefully, she decided to fire the two people when she returned and recruit new professional salesmen. Yifeng was just making a few suggestions. As for what the other party should do, he shouldn't emphasize too much. After all, these were not things he should worry about. After that, Yifeng changed the topic and talked more about his high school life. The memories were often good ones. "That year, you and I were still young and innocent, not worried about life. We just had to move forward with books in our hands. The flowers bloomed in spring and the leaves fell in autumn, everything was so beautiful. Time passed by like a river flowing eastward. Now, more than 10 years later, everyone has matured. Everyone has experienced different ups and downs. Some people have achieved career success and are in high spirits. Some people return to ordinary life and worry about their 3 meals a day. Some people have unhappy marriages, like Su Weiwei. Some people are behind bars, like Yifeng." Apart from sighing about the past, their conversation was more filled with joy. Su Weiwei also felt resentful that Yifeng did not accept her back then. As soon as this topic was brought up, Yifeng immediately surrendered and wanted to run away, which made Su Weiwei laugh. Su Weiwei is already married, but he knows how to chat with her in moderation and won't be too ambiguous with a married person. This is one of the basic bottom lines of being a human being. At this moment Yifeng suddenly remembered Jingguozhong. He needed to meet the person who was now in charge of Lianqing shopping mall. After letting the two wait in the restaurant, he went to the 5th floor alone. The 5th floor of the mall is the office area of the entire huge mall, and the manager's office is located inside. Jingguozhong was a little excited and a little uneasy after returning here. He was now a little hesitant. Yunfeng Group, under Yifeng's management, had already grown to a large scale with assets of more than 1 billion. Yifeng had formulated a comprehensive 5-year development plan with his forward-looking business thinking, including this shopping mall, which was all part of Yifeng's plan. After 5 years of implementation and development, it has grown to its current huge scale, with assets exceeding 10 billion yuan, and is a leading enterprise in the entire Lianqing. It can be said that the current scale of Yunfeng Group is entirely due to Yifeng's efforts back then, and has nothing to do with the current chairman. After implementing Yifeng's plan, the group is now at a bottleneck. Without innovation, it is difficult to develop further. Jingguozhong is now hesitant. Should he help Yifeng regain control of Yunfeng? This is a big gamble. If successful, he will take it one step further. If he fails, he will pack up and leave. Emotionally, he really wanted Yifeng to take charge of Yunfeng again, but selfishly he was afraid of failure. After pacing back and forth for a long time, he recalled Yifeng's confident demeanor. Although he looked gentle on the surface, he could feel it. That man is even sharper than before. Thinking of this, he immediately made up his mind to fully support Yifeng in regaining control of Yunfeng Group. Chapter 14 Backhand. Yifeng went up to the 5th floor and came to the office area of the shopping mall. Just as he was about to go in, he was stopped by two security guards. The two security guards looked at Yifeng and said disdainfully, "Do you know where this place is?" "I'm here to see Jing Guozhong." Yifeng directly stated his purpose and gave Jing Guozhong's name. When the two security guards looked at the shabby-dressed Yifeng, they were sure that this was another person who wanted to use the back door to do things. One of the security guards crossed his arms and said with disdain, "Who are you? Can you see our manager just because you want to?" People of Jing Guozhong's level have countless people coming to see him every day, and they are all dressed in fancy clothes. Which one of them is not a successful person? A shabby guy wants to see the manager? Go away, this is not the place for you. Our manager is busy. Go away. Upon seeing this, the security guard came up and chased the man away. Yifeng fell silent. Could this be arranged by Jing Guozhong? Were you just pretending to be enthusiastic, but in your heart you still didn't want to see me? It is not impossible. People are fickle. After all, Yifeng has been away from the company for 5 years. He is no longer the chairman whose word is law. Moreover, the other party is already in a high position, so there is no need for him to risk offending Xiao Jun by supporting himself. If this is the case, then we need to re-examine Jing Guozhong's reliability. Are you going to leave or not? Seeing Yifeng not moving, a security guard suddenly became angry and raised his voice a few degrees. At this time, Jing Guozhong in the office heard the noise outside. When he opened the office door, stuck his head out and saw the scene outside, he was shocked. He hurried out, his face gloomy, and came to the two security guards, his heart filled with anger. Seeing this, Yifeng said meaningfully, "Jing Guozhong, I thought you didn't want to see me." After hearing Yifeng's words, Jing Guozhong's heart sank instantly. Even though Jing Guozhong was usually calm, a trace of anger appeared on his face at this moment. Bang! He slapped the two security guards twice and shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Didn't I just tell you that if someone comes to see me, just let them in?" The two security guards stood aside in horror, not daring to say a word in rebuttal, their faces full of grievance. They would never have thought that a man in shabby clothes would be Jing Guozhong's distinguished guest. After venting his anger, Jing Guozhong hurriedly said, "Dong. Okay, stop talking and let's go in and talk." Yifeng interrupted his address. There might be Xiao Jun's people here, and it would not be a good thing to reveal his identity. Xiao Jun was Yifeng's roommate back then. The Yi family framed Yifeng and put him in jail, and this classmate put in a lot of effort. Now he has become the chairman of Yunfeng Group and the real helmsman. Jing Guozhong was also a smart man. He immediately understood what Yifeng meant and quickly said, "Okay, let's talk about it after we go in." The two entered the office. Yifeng casually sat on the soft imported leather sofa and looked around. Jing Guozhong's office is not small, about 70 or 80 square meters, and is luxuriously decorated. There is a huge desk with a large screen office computer on it, and folders of various sizes piled up on both sides. Behind it is a large bookcase with many folders and some books neatly arranged on it. Several jade ornaments were placed in the empty spaces at just the right place, and they were obviously valuable items. There were several calligraphy and paintings hanging on the walls of the office. Yifeng could tell at a glance that they were from famous artists and were of astonishing value. It adds a scholarly scent to the office, highlights the owner's temperament, and makes him look like a cultured person at first glance. Yifeng couldn't help but joked, "Old Jing, you have made it big and are considered a person who has the final say in the company." Jing Guozhong stood aside tremblingly, not daring to sit down, and said with a wry smile, "Director Yi, if it weren't for your promotion back then, I wouldn't be where I am today. These are inseparable from your efforts and abilities. You don't have to flatter me deliberately." Yifeng smiled faintly. Indeed, Yifeng used people based entirely on their abilities back then. If he had no ability, he would never have attracted Yifeng's attention, let alone been reused. However, this also indirectly shows that Jing Guozhong is still a grateful person. "I only know that it was Director Yi who helped me at that time, and that's enough." Yifeng nodded and did not deny his statement. At that time, there was actually someone competing with Jing Guozhong for the position of company executive, and the other person's ability was even greater than Jing Guozhong's. The reason why Yifeng chose Jing Guozhong was that in addition to Jing Guozhong's good character and ability, his family conditions were not good at the time. His mother was already seriously ill and there was no way to treat her illness. Yifeng not only promoted him, but also paid for his mother's medical expenses. This was also the reason why when Yifeng asked him to understand Su Weiwei's situation in the store, Jing Guozhong almost waived the rent that Su Weiwei owed without hesitation. Yifeng didn't have time to talk nonsense with him. He waved his hand and said, "Sit down first and tell me about the changes in the group in the past few years." Jing Guozhong looked at Yifeng. After several years, this man was still as confident and calm as before, even though he had nothing now. He was more calm than before, and his hidden edge was even sharper. Zheng Guozhong also secretly felt that his choice was not wrong. He sat nervously next to Yifeng and reported on the changes in the company over the years like his previous subordinates. "Just be brief and tell me about the changes in the company's equity structure." Yifeng was not interested in listening to his report on the company's development history. He could guess it with his butt. Because according to his forward-looking business plan at the time, the company would undoubtedly be successful. The company only has 10 billion in assets today, which in his eyes is already a failure and there is nothing to brag about. What he wants to know now is the changes in the company's equity structure, which is the key for him to take back the company. After listening to it, Jing Guozhong slowly told Yifeng about the situation. Before Yifeng was imprisoned, Yifeng held 70% of the company's shares, Xiao Jun held 20%, and the remaining 10% was held by the company's founding fathers. Yifeng owns 70%, of which 15% is in his own name and the remaining 55% is in the name of his mother Chen Mai. This was the backup plan he had at the time, and the results now prove that his original prediction was correct. After Yifeng was imprisoned, all his property, including shares, were confiscated. Later, through an auction, with the help of the Yi family, the shares fell into Xiao Jun's hands. Even so, thanks to the shares held by Yifeng's mother, he is still the largest shareholder of Yunfeng Group. However, Yifeng was imprisoned and Chen Mai passed away, so the position of major shareholder has remained vacant. Within the company, Xiao Jun was completely free from any constraints. Therefore, Xiao Jun has become the largest shareholder and has taken the position of chairman as he wished. However, Xiao Jun's shares never accounted for more than half of the advantage, and the shares held by Yifeng's mother were always a concern for Xiao Jun. In the past 2 years, he wanted to raise funds and issue additional shares to dilute the 55% stake held by Yifeng's mother, so as to completely control the Yunfeng Group. However, this move was opposed by most shareholders, and Xiao Jun's shareholding did not reach 51%, so the plan could never be passed. In other words, according to the current equity of Yunfeng Group, Yifeng is still the largest shareholder. This way things will be easier. After Jing Guozhong finished speaking, he saw Yifeng fell into deep thought, and asked cautiously, "Mr. Yi, at that time only 15% of your shares were auctioned off. Is the remaining 55% still in your hands?" Chapter 15 Mom, I really saw Dad. Yifeng looked up at Jing Guozhong and said calmly, "Yes, it's still in my hands." When Jing Guozhong heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had taken a reassurance pill. Then he said excitedly, "Director Yi, you are welcome to return to the company at any time and lead us to create greater glory." The 55% equity was indeed still in Yifeng's hands, and he had deposited the equity agreement in the bank's underground safe. He can take it out at any time as long as he needs it. This is the basis for him to return to Yunfeng Group, and it is also one of the weapons to bring down Xiao Jun. It is inevitable that I will go back. If you had wavered just now, everything you have today would be lost in a short time, and you would be left with nothing. You passed the test. Yifeng said calmly. This sentence made Jing Guozhong break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he made the right choice, otherwise he knew that his fate would be the same as what Yifeng said. "Okay, when will you hold the board meeting?" "I will give Xiao Jun a surprise then." Yifeng showed a wicked smile. "It's already the end of the year, and the board of directors will be convened in a few days. We welcome Mr. Yi back to Yunfeng and take charge of the overall situation." Zheng Guozhong looked somewhat excited. "Very good, I'll give everyone a surprise then." Yifeng nodded. Now that he understands the situation, Yifeng feels more confident and it's time to prepare. "Okay, I'm leaving now. Report to me if anything happens." Yifeng stood up and prepared to leave. "Boss Yi, why don't you go out for dinner with me?" Zheng Guozhong said hurriedly. "No, my classmates are still waiting for me." Yifeng left immediately, and when he reached the door, he suddenly turned back and said, "Remember, don't leak the news that I'm back, and remember to prepare a set of decent clothes for me when the time comes." After saying that, he closed the door silently. Zheng Guizhong was stunned. Mr. Yi was very confident this time. If everything went well, his position in the company would definitely be raised to a higher level. In fact, Xiao Jun had been suppressing him for several years. Otherwise, with his ability and qualifications, why would he only be a small shopping mall manager? If it weren't for the protection of other shareholders, I'm afraid he would have been demoted to guard the company's gate. If he could get rid of Xiao Jun, his position would be more stable, and Zheng Guizhong believed more in Yi Feng's ability for the future development of the company. With excitement, Zheng Guizhong began to prepare for the next board meeting, when the man would officially return. What an exciting thing this is! Mr. Yi is still the same Mr. Yi as before, and even more unpredictable. At this time, Yi Feng had already left the office area of Lianqing Plaza and returned to the dining area on the second floor. Luo Yang and Su Weiwei were still there. When they saw Yi Feng coming back, Luo Yang pursed her lips and said proudly, "Brother Feng, what were you doing? It took you so long?" "No, I just caught up with Manager Zheng. It's nothing. We are old friends, and he helped me so much. Shouldn't I be more patient?" "Okay, we still have to go by some things, so we'll leave first." Yi Feng didn't let Luo Yang continue asking questions and quickly changed the subject. "Weiwei, if you want to attract business to your store, you should go back first. If your small store continues to suffer because of your clerk, it may go bankrupt." Su Weiwei pondered for a while and smiled charmingly. "Okay, then we'll keep in touch." After saying that, he waved the phone in his hand. Yi Feng nodded. The two separated in the corridor outside. He took Luo Yang with him, carrying large and small bags like a coolie, out of the mall, and rode his electric scooter home. After returning home and seeing Luo Yang off, Yi Feng's expression gradually became solemn. He still needed to make some arrangements. With the equity in his hands, it is not difficult to bring down Xiao Jun in the company. The key point is that there is a high probability that the Yi family is behind Xiao Jun, so he needs to be more cautious in his actions. The Yi family, as the leading family in Lingnan province, is so powerful that it is unimaginable, otherwise Yi Feng would not have been inexplicably thrown into a prison with almost no chance of getting out. The Yi family is not only powerful in its business empire, the power behind it is even more astonishing. Yi Feng vaguely remembered that 5 years ago, he had almost no ability to resist and was captured by a family servant of the Yi family. He still needs to make some comprehensive preparations to prevent the opponent's counterattack. When the time comes, his revenge will be thunderous rage. At this time, in one of the buildings in Lianqing's most prosperous commercial district, Liu Yingying was sitting in an office, carefully looking through documents. Coco sat on the sofa, neither making any noise nor making any noise. She just stared at a headshot quietly, her big eyes motionless. The little girl seemed to be worried and looked listless. Liu Yingying looked at her daughter with her beautiful eyes and suddenly felt a headache. Ever since she returned to the company from school, her daughter had been looking at that conscienceless photo non-stop. Sometimes Liu Yingying wanted to throw this annoying photo away, but she couldn't help but feel sorry for her daughter's longing for her father. She put down the work in her hands, walked up to Coco, and said softly, "What's wrong with Coco? Are you unhappy?" Xiao Cuckoo pointed at Yi Feng in the photo and said seriously, "Mom, did I see Dad today?" Liu Yingying was stunned. She didn't take Coco's words to heart. She touched Coco's head and deliberately asked, "Dad hasn't come back yet. How did you see him?" "Mom, I really saw Dad. Coco didn't lie to you." Liu Yingying held her forehead with her hand, feeling helpless. She thought it was just the nonsense of a child and reached out to hide the photo frame. Who knew that Coco would hold him tightly in his arms, not letting go at all, with her clear and cute little eyes full of helplessness. Liu Yingying smiled bitterly in her heart. This is what a child without a father is like. The process of growing up is full of longing. In her heart, her father will always exist in her longing, like a figure in a photo frame, visible but untouchable. She saw it with her own eyes and felt pain in her heart. Liu Yingying could only blame it all on the man who made her hate him so much. When she was about to comfort Xiao Cuckoo, there was a commotion outside. Outside the door. "Master Liu, you can't go in." A beautiful secretary dressed exquisitely in yellow clothes shouted to a young man. The young man's name is Liu Yuan. He is the eldest son of the Liu family in Lianqing and also Liu Yingying's cousin. The Liu family is considered a fairly large family in Lianqing, ranking among the top 10 in the entire city, with assets worth more than 10 billion. And this Liu Yuan was a well-known dandy, who was good at eating, drinking, whoring and gambling. Apart from being able to please the old man of the Liu family, he was a good-for-nothing. Seeing that a mere secretary dared to stop him, Liu Yuan said angrily, "Get lost." After saying that, he pushed the secretary away and rushed directly into Liu Yingyin's office. When Coco saw Liu Yuan, she showed a look of fear and subconsciously shrank back, hiding in the corner of the sofa. When Liu Yingyin saw Liu Yuan, her expression changed and she frowned and asked, "Liu Yuan, what are you doing here?" Liu Yuan was in a good mood today because the old man of the Liu family had promised him that after the new year, he would let him take over Liu Yingyin's cosmetics company. This is a company with assets of over 100 million. Liu Yuan feels excited just thinking about it if it falls into his hands. So this time he didn't say anything bad to Liu Yingyin like he did in the past, but said with a smile, "Liu Yingyin, Grandpa said that you must return to the family to attend the family banquet this year." He was very smart and did not tell anyone in advance that the old man of the Liu family wanted to hand over the company to him. When she heard about the family banquet, Liu Yingyin's face turned pale. She didn't want to go back to that cold-hearted family, even for a moment. Chapter 16: Zhu Hai's Revenge. Liu Yingyin was originally the most outstanding woman in the Liu family. She had outstanding looks and talents, and was hailed as the most beautiful woman by the upper class in Lianchen. However, such a beautiful woman became pregnant before marriage 5 years ago. This news was like a hurricane, blowing across the streets and alleys of Lianchen. For a time, she and her entire family became the laughingstock of the entire Lianchen. His father was the eldest son of the Liu family and was originally qualified to inherit the family business. Unfortunately, Liu Yingyin's father had no son, which caused him to lose his status as heir. Because of this, they have been ridiculed by their family for many years, and their family cannot even hold their heads up. After Liu Yingyin gave birth to Xiao Cuckoo, the Liu family felt that Liu Yingyin's family had brought shame to the Liu family, and directly kicked Liu Yingyin's family out of the Liu family villa. As for Xiao Cuckoo, she would humiliate her every time she saw her, causing Liu Yingyin to not want to set foot in that house at all. Afterwards, the family could no longer make ends meet, so Liu Yingyin's father asked the old man of the Liu family for 100,000 yuan and established the Mingxi Cosmetics Company. The old man of the Liu family didn't give money to their family out of pity, but he valued Liu Yingyin's business ability and wanted her to become a tool to make money. Facts have proved that the old man's vision is still very good. In just a few years, Liu Yingyin has developed a small company into a large company with assets of over 100 million. Thinking of these unbearable past events, Liu Yingyin sneered, "What's wrong, asking us to go home for the New Year's Eve dinner? We were not qualified to sit at the table before, are you being kind? I'm not free, I won't go over." Liu Yingyin refused directly. "Har har, this is the old man's decision. You have to go back whether you want to or not. You don't have the final say." Liu Yuan said proudly. "Okay, I've already told you the answer. You know the consequences of not going back." Liu Yuan said sympathetically. When he was about to leave, he saw Coco in the corner of the office. He stopped and sneered, "This bastard is here too." After saying that, he walked out of the office. Liu Yingyin turned pale with anger after hearing these words. She pointed at Liu Yuan's disappearing back and shouted angrily, "Liu Yuan, you are not a human being." Although Coco was only a few years old, she knew everything. When she heard Liu Yuan's words, her tender eyebrows frowned and her little mouth pouted. Wow! In the end, I couldn't help but burst into tears. Tears kept falling from the corners of my eyes and rolling down my cheeks like a stream. No wonder she was so afraid of Liu Yuan. It was obvious that she had heard such words a lot, which hurt her a lot. Liu Yingyin was so angry that she bit her lips tightly, and blood oozed out. Seeing Coco crying, she didn't care about Liu Yuan and hurriedly ran to pick up Coco. Although Liu Yingyin is now the president of a company and looks glamorous on the surface, she is constrained by her family in every way and is looked down upon. Over the years, I don't know how much injustice I have suffered and how much pain I have endured. These are things that outsiders don't know. But for Coco, she could endure everything. Seeing Coco's sad cry, her heart almost bleeds. After some coaxing and deception, Coco slowly stopped crying. The secretary on the side was a little at a loss. As Liu Yingyin's best friend, she knew Liu Yingyin's situation in the Liu family, so she had no intention of letting Liu Yuan in. But she couldn't stop him after all. After what happened, she felt very guilty and whispered, "Yingying, I'm sorry, I couldn't stop him." Liu Yingying wiped the tears from Xiao Kuku's cheeks and said softly, "It's none of your business. Xian, please go and discuss the cooperation with Yunfeng Group on my behalf. I'm not in the mood lately." Liu Yingying said gloomily. The secretary named Xian nodded, then quietly left the office and closed the door behind her. In Liancheng, in a private room of a dance hall in the north of the city, red lights were flashing and it was dark and gloomy. Sitting on the sofa inside was a middle-aged man with an extraordinary demeanor, and a young and charming woman was nestled in his arms. The middle-aged man stretched out his hand and gently pinched the woman's breasts, put them under his nose, took a deep breath, and sure enough, it smelled like milk, and he smiled. Then he shifted his gaze to the trembling man in front of him. His smiling face suddenly faded and turned gloomy. He said in a deep voice, "Zhu Hai, how did you get into this state? You useless thing, don't say you are with me in the future." And someone got him in. What a fucking shame. Zhu Hai had just come out of the hospital with a bandage on his left hand. He didn't dare to say a word in front of this man. This person's background is not simple. He is one of the big bosses in Liancheng's underground world, named Xie Haisheng. He is ruthless, brave and daring to fight and kill. Relying on his courage, he fought his way out of Liancheng and became a well-known figure in Liancheng. "Boss, it's not that I'm incompetent. It's that guy is really good at fighting, and he just got out of jail, and he met Zhaoan, so he put me in jail." Zhu Hai said helplessly with an expression as if his parents had died. "Can you fight?" Xie Haisheng sneered. "Is there anyone who can fight better than him, Xie Haisheng?" You know, the reason why Xie Haisheng was able to gain a foothold in Liancheng was because of his courage and fighting spirit. With his strength as a soldier king, there are few people in Liancheng who can fight him, unless they are martial arts masters worshipped by the big families. Otherwise, there are not many people that Xie Haisheng can take seriously. Xie Haisheng gently pushed the woman next to him away, straightened his body, and then asked, "So what do you want?" "Boss, you must get this back. Even though I was the one who got beaten, it was you who lost face, right?" Zhu Hai was very smart. He deliberately encouraged Xie Haisheng and tied his own affairs to Xie Haisheng's prestige. In this way, Xie Haisheng will most likely stand up for him. "Go back and get that kid here. I'll find a way to deal with him then," Xie Haisheng said in a deep voice. Zhu Hai had a bitter look on his face. He had seen Yi Feng's strength before and knew that ordinary people were no match for him. Zhu Hai's eyes spun, and after thinking about it for a while, he immediately came up with an idea. He hurriedly went up to offer a suggestion. "Boss, there is a girl near my home who has a very good relationship with him. We just need to kidnap her and then he will let us control him, right? Besides, that little girl is pretty. You can have a taste of her when the time comes, boss." Zhu Hai continued to instigate. He showed a sinister smile and licked his dry lips with his tongue, which was very obscene. He could already imagine the result of Yi Feng kneeling down and begging for mercy. "Well, that's a good idea. Call Qiangzi and do it quickly, and bring the person to the number 13 boxing ring." Yi Feng took advantage of the time and redecorated the house with Luo Yang. They were so busy that it was already around 8 or 9 o'clock. After everything was done, Luo Yang left Yi Feng's house and prepared to go home. The street lights here were a little dim. Luo Yang was walking towards home. When she was halfway there, a car suddenly appeared. Suddenly, several burly men came down, covered her mouth and forcibly dragged her into the car. Even the sound of calling out could not be uttered. In the blink of an eye, the car whizzed away and disappeared around the corner of the alley in an instant. Zhu Hai in the car showed a smug smile, looking at the delicate Luo Yang in front of him with an obscene look. Chapter 17 Boxing Gym Number 13. Yi Feng was preparing to take a rest. Lying on the bed, I took out my newly bought mobile phone and logged into my old Feishan account. There are many unread messages on it, all of which were sent a few years ago. Some were from college classmates, and some were from friends. A long time had passed. Yi Feng read the letter carefully but did not choose to reply. His eyes fell on a message from someone named Biscuit. He hesitated for a moment, but finally clicked it. Enter a few words and click send. This little cookie is Liu Yingying's Feishan name. I don't know how the other person is doing now after a few years. Is he married and has children? Still, Yi Feng did not continue to imagine. After all, how could anyone in the world wait for a hopeless person and waste his entire life? It's not that he doesn't believe in love, he just believes in reality. Yifeng's information was destined to fall on deaf ears. As he expected, there was no reply for a long time. He sighed in his heart, so many years had passed. Maybe the other person has already been married and has children who are already half grown, so why bother them anymore? In fact, when he was in love with Liu Yingying, he didn't know that Liu Yingying was the daughter of the Liu family. Liu Yingying also didn't know that he was the founder of Yunfeng Group. It can be said that the love between the two people back then was a bit pure. However, no matter how pure the love is, it cannot withstand the test of time. If Yifeng is thrown into prison, the other party will most likely embark on a life path that has nothing to do with him. Getting married and having children is the life trajectory of most people, so Yifeng did not have too many illusions about the woman he loved deeply. He is no longer the Yifeng of the past, and he has become indifferent to some things. Then he remembered his mother's funeral. Liu Po said that a young and beautiful girl helped to arrange it. He guessed that person should be Liu Yingying. After all, it was a matter of life and death, if not someone they had a close relationship with. I won't help. If they have a chance to meet again in the future, he will say thank you. Thinking of this, Yifeng felt much more relieved. When he was about to fall asleep, his cell phone rang with a pleasant sound. It's an unfamiliar number. Yifeng's number was brand new, and not many people knew about his return. Only Luo Yang, Su Weiwei, and Jing Guozhong left their ways to each other. Where did the number come from? Yifeng hesitated for a while, but still chose to answer the call. Are you Yifeng? A man's voice came. Yifeng frowned, then responded, Yes, who are you? Don't worry about who I am. I have Luo Yang in my hands. If you want to save her, come to the number 13 boxing gym in the North City. Number 13 boxing gym is an underground boxing gym opened by Xia Haixin. People fight in it every day, commonly known as black boxing. Many upper-class people in Lianqing like to go and watch, and Xia Haixin set up gambling games for these spectators to seek excitement. Number 13 boxing gym is one of Xia Haixin's important sources of income. At this time, in a room in the boxing gym, Luo Yang had her hands and feet tied and her mouth was tightly stuffed. He struggled constantly but couldn't speak and could only make humming sounds. Zhu Hai laughed smugly at the side. Qianzi took the phone that was connected to Yifeng's call and put it to Luo Yang's ear. Say a few words to that boy. After saying that, he pulled the cloth off Luo Yang's mouth. Luo Yang immediately cried into the phone, Feng, brother, please save me. Luo Yang was just a student who had just entered college. Faced with a group of ferocious gangsters, she was so scared that her whole body was shaking. Her parents are away all year round and her grandmother is old, so the only person she can rely on is Yifeng. At this moment, she was like a drowning child, and Yifeng was the only life-saving plank. You bitch, are you still crying? You'll be in trouble soon. The young man named Xiangzi slapped Luo Yang hard and then took away her cell phone. Luo Yang's fair cheeks suddenly turned red, her eyes were filled with fear, and she pursed her lips and dared not utter another word. Come here quickly, or you might see a naked beauty. Xiangzi said with a lewd smile, and then hung up the phone. On the other end of the phone, Yifeng had a gloomy face, and anger had already risen to his brain. He put on his coat, rode his electric scooter against the cold wind, and headed to boxing gym number 13 with murderous intent. Inside the hall of boxing gym number 13, the lights were dim, and on the huge ring, two boxers were fighting against each other. The seats were packed, and every time a boxer delivered a powerful blow, there was a wave of noise. Boxing gym number 13 is known as the bloodiest place in Lianqing, where life and death duels take place every day. Every boxer fights in the ring, risking his life. The winner will receive a huge bonus. When the loser dies, his body will be taken to the wilderness outside the city by the people in the boxing gym and hastily buried, and even his name will not be known to anyone. At this time, the duel on the stage was still going on. A huge, muscular boxer suddenly grabbed his opponent's neck. The latter struggled hard with veins bulging. He elbowed the opponent in the eye, causing the eyeball to burst and a stream of blood to spurt out. The latter instantly lost his fighting ability and became weak. The boxer who had the upper hand then used his knees to repeatedly hit the opponent's chest. After more than 10 consecutive hits, the latter vomited blood, the light in his eyes dimmed instantly, and he fell heavily to the ground, no longer breathing. The victorious boxer raised his hands to celebrate, which immediately caused thunderous cheers from the audience. On the podium, Xia Haixing and a young man sat side by side and watched the entire boxing match. Xia Lao Sai, the boxer you hired back from Southeast Asia at a high price, is quite capable. The young man next to Xia Haixing smiled slightly. This young man was actually another big shot in Liancheng who was on par with Xia Haixing. His name is Liu Sandao, and his nickname is Go Jianglong. He is not a native of Liancheng, but a rising star who suddenly emerged a few years ago. At that time, he was alone, fighting and killing in Liancheng. He not only developed his own power, but also firmly established his foothold in Liancheng. At that time, even when Xia Haixing and another big boss joined forces to suppress him, they were unable to kill him, resulting in a three-way confrontation in the underground world. This is a tougher character than Xia Haixing, and his strength is not inferior to Xia Haixing in the slightest. Upon hearing this, Xia Haixing glanced at his mortal enemy and said proudly, "Of course, unless you do it yourself, no one can take him down with just your men." Liu Sandao sneered, "It looks good but is useless. Xiao-san, go down and meet him." After Liu Sandao finished speaking, a young man with a crew cut walked out from behind him. He was thin, but there was a hint of ruthlessness in his eyes. He said to Liu Sandao confidently, "Third brother, watch how I take down that good-for-nothing." After saying that, he walked directly onto the stage. Although Xia Haixing and Liu Sandao are very famous in Liancheng, not many people know them. Unless you are someone with a certain status in Liancheng, you will only meet him occasionally on some occasions. In a good high position in the auditorium, two women sat in an inconspicuous corner. One of them turned out to be the internet celebrity girl named Qingqing whom Yi Feng accidentally knocked down at school yesterday. The other woman was equally good-looking, but she had a fiery temperament and dressed very unsociably, wearing a black tights and exuding a cool air. The woman glanced at Xia Haixing and Liu Sandao and whispered, "Qingqing, see, those two are the two big bosses who dominate the underground world." Qingqing was still in shock at this moment. The boxer had just been beaten to death and dragged out of the arena. It was too shocking for her. If it wasn't for her best friend pulling her away, she would never have dared to come to such a place. Chapter 18. Are you worthy enough to negotiate with me? As a native of Liancheng, Qingqing naturally knew the villain that her best friend was talking about. It could be said that there was no one in Liancheng who was not afraid of her. You have to know that her best friend's identity is not ordinary. Her father is a figure who can be compared with Liu Sandao and his ilk. He is naturally not unfamiliar with the two of them, and can even be said to be very familiar with them. When Qingqing heard what the other party said, she became even more uneasy, but then she glanced at the old man standing behind them and felt a little relieved. At this time, Liu Sandao's subordinate named Xiao-san had already gone up to the ring and was staring at the burly, muscular boxer. "Liu Sandao, your subordinate is pretty good, what a pity." Xia Haixing looked at the mistress on the stage as if she were a dead person. "Let's see the results." Liu Sandao raised the corner of his mouth and smiled. While they were talking, the two people on the stage had already started fighting. Although the Southeast Asian boxer was strong and powerful, his movements were slow, and every attack was dodged by the man with a buzz cut named Xiao-san. This young man named Xiao-san relied on his agile movements to render his opponent helpless for a moment, who only had brute force. Xiao-san even took advantage of a few opportunities to punch the other party a few times. At this time, a young man walked in from outside the door. He did not attract anyone's attention, and everyone's eyes were focused on the ring. The person who came was Yi Feng. When he saw this scene, his eyebrows were twisted together. The underground boxing gym is the darkest place. If someone dies here, it's no big deal. I glanced around and heard noisy cheers everywhere, but I didn't see Luo Yang. He directly dialed the same number as before, and after the call was connected, he said in a cold voice, "I'm already at the boxing gym." In a lounge of the boxing gym, Xiangzi went out with his cell phone, came to Xia Haixing, and whispered, "Boss, that kid is here. Do you really dare to come?" Xia Haixing looked a little surprised, and then continued, "Go down and bring him here." Xiangzi nodded, walked to the door, and immediately found Yi Feng. He smiled and said, "Are you Yi Feng? Our boss wants you to go up there." After saying that, he turned around and led the way, completely ignoring Yi Feng. He's just a young man, nothing to worry about. In the past, when those tough guys in Liancheng provoked them, didn't they end up begging for mercy? Yi Feng followed Xiangzi and came directly to Xia Haixing, and asked coldly, where are my people? Xie Haixing took a look at Yifeng. He was thin and looked somewhat elegant, and did not look like someone who could fight at all. He was a little disappointed. He didn't expect that such a person could beat Zhu Hai like that. Originally, he thought that Yifeng at least had some strength, so he lured him here and threatened Luo Yang to force him to have a boxing match. But even with such a physique, he was knocked down by one punch and easily crushed to death. Bring the people out. Xie Haixing waved his hand. Qiangzi turned and walked towards the room where Luo Yang was imprisoned. After a while, Qiangzi, Zhu Hai, a few young people and Luo Yang came out. Seeing that Luo Yang was fine, Yifeng instantly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Let her go." Xie Haixing sneered, "Let her go? You beat up my people, and you still want to let him go?" Seeing this, Zhu Hai instantly gained confidence and pointed at Yifeng and said, "Boss, you must not let this kid go. Kill him." At this time, Liu Sandao, who was standing at the side, saw this scene and looked disdainful. He sneered, "Xie Haixing, kidnapping a woman is really too cheap of you." Xie Haixing said nonchalantly, "What's the point of losing money? This kid beat up my people. How can I survive in Lianqing in the future if I don't teach him a lesson?" At this moment, a scene here caught Qingqing's attention, and he subconsciously murmured, "Why is it him?" The woman next to her pointed at Yifeng and asked in a low voice, "Qingqing, do you know that person?" Qingqing shook her head. "I saw him once in school. He seemed to be a senior of mine, but it shouldn't be him." The beautiful and tough woman said, "What a pity." Qingqing asked doubtfully, "Xiaolan, what's the pity?" Qingqing had never come into contact with people from the underground world and didn't know how brutal they were. But the woman named Xiaolan is different. Her father is the most powerful boss in Lianqing. Naturally, he knows that offending these people will not have good consequences. It's obvious that he has offended Xie Haixing. This man is very vicious. How can he survive after offending him? Liu Sandao is still a man with some bottom line, but Xie Haixing is different. He kills people as if he were pinching an ant to death. Qingqing was shocked by these words. She silently paid attention to the situation over there, with half her heart in her throat. Liu Sandao obviously knew Xie Haixing very well. After mocking him, he stopped talking, even though he and Xie Haixing were sworn enemies. But now is not the time to tear each other apart. Besides, he is not a good person and he has seen a lot of things like this. Xie Haixing ignored Liu Sandao and Zhu Hai, and said to Yifeng in a playful tone, "Go down and have a good fight with my boxer. If she survives, I can let her go." In Xie Haixing's eyes, Yifeng was just an insignificant little person. He concluded that there was no way Yifeng could survive the Southeast Asian boxer. Even if he survives, he won't let him go easily. At least, have some fun with it. He glanced at Luo Yang, his eyes full of fanaticism. It was obvious that she was a rookie. How could Xie Haixing miss such a good opportunity? Yifeng saw the obscene look in his eyes, raised his eyebrows, and said in a deep voice, "Are you qualified to negotiate terms with me?" Despite the noise all around, Yifeng's words were loud and powerful, and every word was heard by Xie Haixing. As soon as these words were spoken, Xie Haixing's face instantly darkened. This was a slap in his face. Especially in front of Liu Sandao, where would he put his face in the future? He was a little stunned, but at the same time he laughed out of anger, looking at Yifeng as if he was a dead person. Yifeng's words surprised Liu Sandao a little. He didn't expect that this opponent, although he looked weak, was actually quite courageous. But it's a pity that I'm afraid I can't get out of here today. The most proud person was Zhu Hai, as he knew Xie Haixing's temper best. Originally, Yifeng might have had a chance to survive, but now it seemed that he was dead. Even the girl named Xiaolan in the distance shook her head and said softly, "Qingqing, I'm afraid your senior will not be able to leave here." Qingqing's face turned pale when she heard this, and then she said, "Xiaolan, is there any way to help him?" Xiaolan shook her head and said, "Don't even mention me. Even if my dad came, Xie Haixing wouldn't give him face." Xie Haixing's expression gradually revealed a hint of murderous intent, but Yifeng remained calm. What is this little scene? At the beginning, when faced with those powerful foreign forces, he killed them without hesitation. Yifeng was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Since you like boxing so much, I will practice with you." After saying that, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Xie Haixing by the collar with lightning speed, threw him into the air like a chicken, and kicked him towards the ring. The latter flew across more than 10 meters like a kite, and crashed onto the stage with a bang. The two men dueling on the stage were so shocked that they stopped what they were doing and stared blankly at Xie Haixing, who fell from the sky. The sudden scene caused an uproar in the audience. Chapter 19. Give me a reason not to kill you. Master. Liu Sandao's expression was stiff, and he looked at Yifeng, who was so close to him, as if he were a monster. Xie Haixing is not an ordinary person. The other party is a real soldier-level figure. Even if it was himself, he was only on par with Xie Haixing, and it would be difficult to kill him. And this young man who came out of nowhere kicked Xie Haixing away like a chicken. What kind of strength is this? Liu Sandao found it hard to imagine that even the masters supported by the families in Lianshan could not do it so easily. In addition to being shocked, Liu Sandao felt a chill in his heart. In front of the other party, he was afraid that even he would not have the slightest power to resist. Unconsciously, a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead, and he did not dare to show any hostility. Yifeng's actions were so shocking that everyone in the audience looked at him in disbelief. Qingqing, this person is unfathomable. The girl named Xiaolan said solemnly. Qingqing didn't know what kind of strength he had, but when she saw that Yifeng was fine, she felt inexplicably relieved. Miss, this person is very scary and dangerous. The old man who had been silent behind Xiaolan said solemnly. Among them, Zhu Hai had the most unsightly expression. His expression changed from ecstasy to shock, then to fear, and finally to despair. The whole process took only a few minutes. Yifeng ignored everyone's gazes, went up and pulled Luo Yang over, then broke Zhu Hai's leg bone with one kick. Zhu Hai's face was distorted and he let out a scream like a pig being slaughtered. The screams echoed throughout the entire boxing gym, as desolate as it could be. You sit here for a while, close your eyes, and don't look. Yifeng pushed Luo Yang to sit down on a seat and spoke softly. Luo Yang nodded in agreement like a chick pecking at rice. The moment she saw Yifeng, her heart was at peace. Yifeng leaped up, flew over 10 meters, crossed the audience seats, landed on the ring, slammed his feet on the ground with a bang, and raised a cloud of dust. Xie Haixing crawled up from the ring in a panic, vomiting a trace of blood from his mouth, his eyes full of fear. This is Xie Laosi. Although it was dim, some people who were familiar with Xie Haixing recognized him on the ring at a glance and gasped. The scene instantly became quiet and silent. No one would have thought that Xie Haixing, the owner of the boxing gym, would be kicked onto the ring. Xie Haixing's eyes were filled with fear as he stared at the young man in front of him with a gentle smile. My heart has begun to tremble. Who are you? He looked doubtful and asked slowly. Who am I? Don't worry about it. You just need to know that you have succeeded in angering me. Yifeng said this, too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He took a step forward and punched down. Although Xie Haixing was known as the king of soldiers, he was undoubtedly like an ant in front of Yifeng. Several crackling sounds were heard in succession, and huge screams echoed in every corner of the boxing gym. Yifeng crushed all of his limbs. The endless pain made Xie Haixing's face twisted. At this moment, his heart was full of regret. Why did he provoke such a killer? Looking at the quiet and powerless young man, I didn't even have the strength to fight back in front of him. He was the only one who tortured others like this before, but he never expected that one day he would also suffer such pain. This scene not only did not cause panic among the audience, but everyone cheered loudly with excitement. Why do they come to watch black boxing? Isn't it this kind of thrill that one seeks between life and death? Moreover, the protagonist is Xie Haixing, who is famous in Lianshan. This made everyone even more excited, and they gathered around waving flags and cheering. The atmosphere was very excited. Qingqing's expression changed again and again. She didn't expect Yifeng to be so powerful. She secretly laughed at the two male classmates who actually wanted to conflict with Yifeng. She even found herself funny. If she provoked such a powerful man, she didn't know what would happen. On the court, Xie Haixing had completely collapsed on the ring, covered in blood, his hands and feet limp, and all of his bones crushed by Yifeng. Xie Haixing's breathing became short, but after all, he was a soldier king level, and he still did not die. Yifeng didn't have time to waste with him, so he walked forward and grabbed Xie Haixing's neck with one hand. He picked him up, his expression was cold, a hint of murderous intent flashed across his face, and he twisted him hard. Crack! Xie Haixing's head suddenly tilted and he was dead. Xie Haixing is dead. A gangster who had dominated Lianqing for more than a decade was just crushed to death like that. And the person who crushed him to death was an unknown young man. Even his death was unclear. Liu Sandao's scalp felt numb, a chill ran to his head, and his whole body felt buzzing and dazed. The entire boxing gym suddenly became quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. This matter was too big. In full view of everyone, Feng left the ring and came directly in front of Liu Sandao. His eyes were cold and murderous. Liu Sandao was scared at this time. Even though he had the title of Crossing the River Dragon, he had experienced countless life and death battles. Under Feng's death gaze, he began to tremble. In front of this man, he knew that he was no match at all and his death would not be much better than Xie Haixing's. I'm not in the same group with Xie Haixing. Liu Sandao hastily distanced himself from the matter, feeling more fearful than ever before. Feng grinned, becoming somewhat gentle, and then said, "Give me a reason not to kill you." Liu Sandao thought about it for a long time, and said in an attitude that was almost like he was trying to survive, "Maybe I can be of some use to you. This reason is not sufficient to save your life." Liu Sandao had already cursed the ancestors of the deceased Xie Haixing 1,000 times. How had he provoked this killer? However, he didn't have much time to think about it. He knelt down quickly and said to Feng respectfully, "As long as you don't mind, my life will be yours from now on, and you can use it as you like." Feng looked at Liu Sandao and weighed the pros and cons in his mind. It seemed that he really needed such a person to act in the future. It will be much more convenient to do things in the future, at least I don't have to do everything myself. Your life is saved, but I'll let you keep your head for now. Feng said lightly. Clean this place up. And this person, I don't want to see him again. Do you understand? Feng pointed at Zhu Hai who was lying on the ground. Upon hearing this, the latter's face changed drastically. Enduring the pain, he crawled to Feng's feet and begged bitterly, Feng, we have been neighbors for many years after all, please don't kill me. Feng kicked him away and walked outside with Luo Yang. Before leaving, he did not forget to say to Liu Sandao, "Remember what you said." Liu Sandao was stunned for a moment, and only came back to his senses until Feng disappeared at the door. He looked at Xie Haixing who was completely dead on the ring. After tonight, the underground world of Lianqing will be reshuffled. But for him, it is a good thing, as he can take advantage of the opportunity to annex Xie Haixing's territory, and then his power will increase greatly. But it also means that he will have to face the one-eyed dragon alone. Chapter 20 The Chen family is wroth. Liu Sandao knew what to do next. A bloody massacre took place in the boxing gym, and all the forces left by Xie Haixing would be wiped out tonight. On Qingqing's side, the girl named Xielan's face changed drastically. She knew the serious consequences of Xie Haixing's death. Let's go back. After saying that, he immediately called Qingqing and the old man, and took advantage of the chaos to leave the gym. Tonight is destined to be a restless night. This incident will shock the entire Lianqing. But these have little to do with Feng anymore, as he has already left the boxing gym. Came outside. Luo Yang was frightened and her face turned pale. She looked back blankly at the entrance of the boxing gym. Okay, nothing's wrong. Feng regained his peaceful and elegant smile, completely devoid of the fierce murderous aura he had just had. Brother Feng, let's go back quickly, I'm scared. Luo Yang's eyes were red, and fear and grievance were revealed in her eyes. Feng knew that what happened today would leave a big shadow on her, so he touched her head and comforted her. Okay, let's go back now. Luo Yang nodded vigorously. Feng took the small electric scooter parked at the door, took Luo Yang with him, and disappeared into the dim night. After sending Luo Yang home, it was almost 12 o'clock and he quickly fell asleep. At this time, Lianqing was in chaos. Due to Xie Haixing's death, fierce fighting broke out everywhere under the command of Liu Sandao. Another force, a boss nicknamed One-Eyed Dragon, also got the news soon. They sent people to seize Xie Haixing's territory. After one night of action, both sides occupied Xie Haixing's original territory. After Liu Sandao and Du Yanlong occupied Xie Haixing's territory, they tacitly agreed not to conflict with each other. A delicate balance was maintained. Liu Sandao was afraid of the strength that the old fox Du Yanlong had accumulated over the years. The One-Eyed Dragon knew everything that happened in the boxing gym through the girl named Xielan, and he was even more afraid of the strength of the mysterious young man. Lianqing is like a pond, with big and small fish, turtles and tortoises living in it. Any slight disturbance can instantly shake the existence in the pond. The Chen family, the number one family in Lianqing, has been entrenched in Lianqing for decades and its family business assets are worth billions. He has monopolized Lianqing's building materials, real estate, earthwork and other businesses for many years, and neither the black and white worlds dare to provoke him. The businesses done by the Chen family must be protected by both the black and white worlds, and anyone who is well informed knows this. Among the three major underworld forces in Lianqing, Xia Haixing is just a dog raised by the Chen family. Now that Xia Haixing has been killed by a mysterious person, it has deeply touched the nerves of the Chen family. It is a huge loss for the Chen family. Check for me. Inside the Chen family villa, in the spacious and luxurious hall, on the expensive sofa, the head of the Chen family spoke loudly with a gloomy expression. His son, Chen Xian, the eldest son of the Chen family, stood aside, not daring to make a sound, and carefully observed his father's expression. Xia Haixing's death knew what it meant. Most likely, the Chen family's business would require the use of some shady people. Now that Xia Haixing is dead, their family's voice in Lianqing will inevitably be weakened. Although the family has martial arts masters on their payroll, those are the family's heritage and cannot be used easily. Dad, what should we do now? You useless guy, what else can you do? Find out who is behind this, send the family's servants to bring me the head. Chen Hong said in a deep voice. The Chen family had previously acquired a piece of land and was planning to develop a plot of land. Now is the critical period for preparing for demolition. Originally, I wanted Xia Haixing to demolish the old buildings at a low price, so that I could save a lot of demolition money. Now it seems that this matter will be delayed for a while, and we may have to seek cooperation from the one-eyed dragon. Chen Hong felt so angry when he thought about giving up some of his interests. What are you still standing there for? Go and do it now. Chen Hong cursed Chen Xian angrily. Dad, I'll do it right away. Then he walked outside. Yunfeng Tower is the tallest building in Lianqing and also a landmark building in Lianqing. Yunfeng Group invested 2 billion yuan in its construction. The entire Yunfeng building is located in the most prosperous area of Lianqing. Like a king, it overlooks the entire Lianqing, and no one can surpass it. Even the major families in Lianqing can only look up to this lone enterprise that has risen in recent years. In Lianqing, where every inch of land is valuable, the current value of Yunfeng building has increased several times compared to the original investment cost. The assets of this building alone are enough to firmly secure Lianqing's leading position in the business community. Xiao Jun, the current helmsman of Yunfeng Group, has been named an outstanding youth for 3 consecutive years, and even the official authorities regard him as a guest of honor. On the top floor of Yunfeng building, Xiao Jun, wearing a straight suit, elegant yet luxurious, stood in front of the wide floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. He quietly looked at the panoramic view of Lianqing. The most beautiful scenery was in front of him, but he had no intention of appreciating it. Under his leadership, Yunfeng Group has developed according to the business map left by Yi Feng and has grown to its current scale. The plan has been implemented, and the company seems to have reached a bottleneck that it cannot break through, and it is difficult to move to the next level. Until this year, there have even been signs of decline, which has attracted criticism from many shareholders. He believed that Xiao Jun's position was not obtained in a legitimate way and he lacked the strategic vision of a corporate leader, which made him feel somewhat dangerous. The most important thing is that the shares he holds can never form an overwhelming advantage over other shareholders. Since Yi Feng was imprisoned, his shares were confiscated and auctioned, and Xiao Jun got them as he wished. However, the whereabouts of 55% of the shares are still unknown, resulting in the seat of the company's major shareholder being vacant for many years. Those shares have always been a thorn in his heart, deeply embedded in his heart, and there is no way to remove them. Over the years, he has tried several times to reform the company's board of directors and introduce financing to dilute the 55% stake. Then, by operating from it, he could successfully become the major shareholder of Yunfeng Group and the true helmsman. However, he encountered opposition from other shareholders every time, and the fact that he held less than 51% of the shares made it difficult for him to implement the plan. It's really not enough to let people live in peace even after death. Xiao Jun cursed angrily. His face did not have a trace of elegance, but rather a sinister look. The reference to his words was self-evident. He was referring to Yi Feng, who he thought was still in prison. Mr. Xiao, this year's board meeting has been arranged. It will be in 3 days. Is there anything else you need to arrange? A sexy female secretary with a curvy figure, wearing a white shirt and a short skirt, walked in and spoke cautiously. Hold according to the established schedule. Xiao Jun spoke calmly, with a look of decision in his eyes. Since they were unwilling to cooperate with the reform, he could only use hard tactics. Chapter 21: Su Weiwei's Misfortune. Almost at the moment when Yunfeng Group decided to convene the board meeting, Yifeng had already received a notice from Jingguizhong. Yifeng hung up the phone. In a few days, he was going to give his former classmates a big surprise. If it weren't for Xiao Jun's help, it would not have been so easy even if someone in the Yi family wanted to frame him. But Yifeng never imagined that the person he trusted the most would be the one who stabbed him in the back. This made his hatred for Xiao Jun no less than that for the Yi family. If he had not been imprisoned, his mother might not have died. Even if he lost Yunfeng Group, he would not blink an eye, but the death of his mother would be a pain in his heart that could never be compensated. Whenever he thought of this, Yifeng wished he could kill all those people. 3 days later, Yifeng would not only take back the company that belonged to him. Xiao Jun's head must be used as a sacrifice. Only blood can cleanse this indelible hatred. No one can stop him from taking revenge, not even the Yi family. One day, everyone in the Yi family who was involved in this matter will pay for everything with blood. He believed that this day would not be too far away. Suppressing these thoughts, Yifeng originally wanted to go to the mall to talk to Jingguizhong in person, but at this time Su Weiwei called. She wanted Yifeng to go to her shop to give some guidance. After thinking about it, Yifeng agreed since it was on his way. Then he walked all the way to Liu Po's house, wanting to see Luo Yang. After all, the girl was scared badly last night. After what happened last night, Luo Yang was still a little frightened, like a frightened rabbit. Yifeng could understand it after all, he was just a college student and had never seen such scenes before. Not to mention being kidnapped and slapped a few times, Yifeng comforted her and she finally felt better. Whether it was Zhu Hai or the man named Qiangzi, I'm afraid Liu Sandao had already dealt with them by now. After leaving Liu Po's house, Yifeng went directly to Lianqing Square and walked to the office area on the top floor. The security guards from last time have been replaced by new faces, which shows that Jingguizhong is quite meticulous in his work and has already dismissed the 2 security guards. Mr. Yi. When Jingguizhong saw Yifeng, he called out to him respectfully, just like he was Yifeng's subordinate back then. Yifeng was satisfied with his attitude. After 2 days of testing back and forth, Yifeng was sure that Jingguizhong had no ulterior motives. So there were no more rules, and he said calmly, "Old Zheng, you don't have to be so reserved, just be like before." Half an hour later, Yifeng came out of Jingguizhong's office with satisfaction. Everything had been negotiated. Next, he went to the 3rd floor of the shopping mall and walked along the bright aisle towards Su Weiwei's shop. The 3rd floor of the mall is very large, selling clothing, bags, cosmetics and other brand stores. There are even some world-renowned luxury goods stores here. It can be said that this is a shopping paradise for women. Su Weiwei's shop is at the end of the corridor, a bit remote, and has relatively few customers compared to a huge shopping mall. Otherwise, considering the prosperity of the shopping mall, it would be impossible to rent it for only tens of thousands of yuan a month. Every shop here can be said to be worth every inch of land, and none of them is vacant. Many people even use their connections and try their best to rent a shop here. In Su Weiwei's shop. As expected, Yifeng did not see the 2 salesmen, but there were more customers. Without employees, Su Weiwei took over personally, constantly greeting customers, and there was also a girl Yifeng didn't know who was helping out. Yifeng. When she saw Yifeng, Su Weiwei smiled, put down their work in her hands and hurried to greet him. Yifeng smiled slightly and said, "Miss Su, your shop is doing good business today." Su Weiwei smiled shyly, "It's all thanks to you." Yifeng did not comment, and said, "I just said a few words casually, I dare not take credit for it. Come in and sit down." Su Weiwei dragged out a chair from the front desk and greeted them. "Forget it, I won't sit here. I have to go back soon. Yifeng, can you help me see what improvements the store needs to make?" Su Weiwei put away her smile and spoke seriously. A clothing store like this doesn't really need too much improvement, as there are plenty of high-end brands around. If you take their high-end route, you will definitely not be competitive at all. This is actually quite good. However, the most important thing is to ensure service and quality, so Yifeng does not have many good suggestions. Your store is very accurate in attracting customers. As long as you ensure service and quality, and take advantage of the strong flow of people in the mall, your business will not be bad. Yifeng smiled slightly. I'll pay attention to this in the future, Su Weiwei said repeatedly. In fact, Su Weiwei's business ability is not bad, but sometimes she is too soft-hearted and can't make up her mind. For example, the two salesmen mentioned above were not easily fired because they were related to the company. This resulted in the store's business being poor and suffering continuous losses, and it was almost at the point of closing. If Yifeng hadn't spoken yesterday, the mall staff would never have given her even a minute. You know, there was a long queue of people waiting to rent a shop outside, and some even tried to get connections with the management staff. I also want to get a shop in the Yincheng shopping mall. Okay, your business is so good here, I won't bother you anymore, Yifeng said with a smile. I send you. Su Weiwei followed him out. Just then, a man came outside the store. He was about 30 years old, with a gloomy and angry face. When Su Weiwei saw this, her face changed drastically and turned pale. When the man saw Su Weiwei, he loudly asked, Su Weiwei, why did you fire my sister? He started by questioning angrily, not giving Su Weiwei any face at all. Su Weiwei didn't dare to look Yifeng in the eye. Her expression changed again and again. She was still a little timid. She bit her lips and remained silent. What's going on? Brother Yinfeng was completely confused and had no idea what was going on, but he could tell from what the other party said. The other party's purpose was related to Su Weiwei's dismissal of the two salesmen. From this, it is not difficult to guess that the man in front of him is Su Weiwei's disappointing husband. Zheng Guozhong told Yifeng about Su Weiwei's situation. She was addicted to gambling and lost all her family property. He often came to the mall and asked Su Weiwei for money in her store, and made a scene if she refused to give him money. The commotion has caused so much noise that some of the mall's security guards and managers have become accustomed to it. This also made Zheng Guozhong impressed with Su Weiwei, otherwise, there were so many merchants in the mall, and Zheng Guozhong, as a general manager, would not have known them all. After a long while, Su Weiwei gritted her teeth and said, Your sister is not suitable for this job at all. If she continues to work here, my place will go bankrupt sooner or later. If this continues, my son and I won't even be able to afford food. Su Weiwei seemed to have endured to the point of exploding, and she almost shouted out this sentence. Chapter 22 People can't be too shameless. Su Weiwei, this is your business. You should get them back to work immediately, or you can compensate her. Otherwise, I will never forgive you. Sure enough, the ultimate goal is still money. There was despair in Su Weiwei's eyes. Her unhappy marriage life had exhausted her mentally and physically. The shop, which had been doing well, was ruined by Wudong's disturbance. Customers from all around left the shop one after another, fearing that something might happen. Su Weiwei looked at Wudong desperately, then looked at Yifeng, and with a trace of courage in her heart, she said coldly, Wudong, I won't let your sister come back to work, and I don't have any money. When Wudong heard this, he immediately got angry. He walked forward and grabbed Su Weiwei's hair, wanting to slap her. He found that his hand was held tightly by someone, as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, making it impossible for him to move at all. Yifeng grabbed his hand and said coldly, Are you Weiwei's husband? Wudong was stunned at first, then he said angrily, Who are you? You have no right to interfere in our affairs. I can't control you, but it's wrong if you hit someone. You can be shameless, but you can't be shameless. Yifeng said coldly and pushed Wudong away. He didn't expect that after not seeing each other for many years, Su Weiwei would finally choose such a man. What an unhappy marriage. He dared to beat her like this in public. One can imagine how miserable his marriage and family life were. How can a person's life be good if he lives under domestic violence? Su Weiwei was once a proud girl, but in front of Wudong, she became trembling and her eyes were full of fear. Yifeng was not the kind of person who meddles in other people's affairs, so he would definitely not intervene if the couple had a quarrel. But if he was asked to fight, he would never agree. Wudong looked at Yifeng carefully, and then he became even more angry. He pointed at Yifeng and said loudly, You are so good, Su Weiwei. My sister said that you were seducing men outside. I didn't believe it at first, but it seems that she didn't lie to me, you bitch. I don't. Su Weiwei's eyes were already red at this time, and she shouted loudly with a crying voice. You still don't admit it. I'll kill you, you stinky bitch. Wudong rushed forward and pretended to beat him up. Su Weiwei was so scared that she took a few steps back, her face turning pale. Seeing this, Yifeng hurriedly stopped Wudong again. Is there an adulterer protecting you? Look at me, how I'm going to deal with you two bastards together. In a rage, Wudong lost his mind and punched Yifeng. In Yifeng's eyes, these threats were as pale and powerless as ants threatening elephants. He grabbed Wudong's arm with one hand and kicked him, sending Wudong flying sideways. Bang! Wudong bumped into the glass door, smashing it to pieces. He fell to the ground, covered in blood, and the ground was a mess. Wudong was stabbed by glass shards in several places and his face was full of horror. This kind of person only bullies his wife and dares not say a word to anyone who is slightly tougher. He is even worse than Zhu Hai and his ilk. He crawled up from the ground in fear, pointed at Su Weiwei and shouted angrily, "How dare you ask the adulterer to beat me? Go back and see how I'll deal with you." After saying these harsh words, he turned and left the store. Su Weiwei had a complicated expression, one of fear and grievance. Finally, she couldn't hold back her sobs and burst into tears on the cash register, pouring out all the grievances hidden in her heart. Yifeng sighed softly. After graduating for many years, he could imagine that many of his classmates might not be living a satisfactory life, but when he saw it with his own eyes, he still couldn't help feeling sad. For a moment, he didn't know how to comfort the other person. At this time, Su Weiwei's friend in the store walked over and patted Su Weiwei on the back. "Weiwei, if it really doesn't work out, we can just get a divorce. Hongmei, he will kill me," Su Weiwei said in a trembling voice. There was endless fear in his words. Not only did Su Weiwei suffer domestic violence and beatings for many years, but her personal safety was also threatened, making her feel like she was living in hell and unable to escape. The two had been classmates for 3 years, and Yifeng knew very well that Su Weiwei's personality was a bit cowardly. Faced with Wudong's threats, he would most likely choose to compromise and not consider himself. The girl named Hongmei looked up at Yifeng and said, "Won't you help Weiwei?" Yifeng felt helpless. He really couldn't interfere in other people's family affairs, but he couldn't just watch his old classmates suffer like this. After thinking for a while, he sighed and said, "Weiwei, this kind of person is too dangerous. You can choose to separate for a while. As for whether to divorce or not, it's up to you to decide. If you are afraid to go back by yourself, I will ask Jingguozhong to arrange a few people to go back with you to ensure your safety. No matter what choice you make, divorce or not, he will not be a threat to you." Su Weiwei seemed to have made a decision after hearing this. She looked up, wiped her tears, nodded, and the fear in her eyes dissipated a lot. Yifeng comforted Su Weiwei, then called Jingguozhong and asked him to arrange for a few mall security guards to go back with Su Weiwei to handle the matter. "Even if we don't divorce, we will still live separately. If they continue to live together, I wonder what happened to Su Weiwei after she was beaten." Yifeng told Jingguozhong that if Wudong continued to cause trouble at the mall, he should be thrown into the police station. People like this won't learn their lesson unless they are taught a lesson. After leaving Lianqing shopping mall, Yifeng was filled with melancholy. Some are happy and some are sad. Boxing gym number 13. After cleaning, the owner of this place has completely changed. Not only the boxing gym, but also the land and industry originally belonging to Xie Haixing have been mostly eaten up by Liu Sandao. The rest was taken by another big boss nicknamed One-Eyed Dragon. Liu Sandao did not feel happy about the victory, but was a little worried. He sensed danger. A danger from the Chen family. In Lianqing, everyone knew that Xie Haixing was the dog raised by the Chen family, and now this dog died inexplicably. The Chen family has already blamed Liu Sandao for this. If he relied solely on his current power, he would not be able to compete with the huge Chen family. Not to mention Liu Sandao, even the One-Eyed Dragon who had taken root in Lianqing for decades would find it difficult to withstand the wrath of a big family. When Liu Sandao was looking worried, the young man named Xiao Sun walked in. "Third brother, that person is coming." When Liu Sandao heard this, he felt a chill in his heart. The scene of the other party beating and killing Xie Haixing was still before his eyes. He kills decisively, cleanly and neatly without any delay. His strength is probably far beyond that of a soldier king. How can such a person not be scary? Perhaps, I just don't know if the other party can withstand the wrath of the Chen family. Liu Sandao suddenly had an idea in his mind and said hurriedly, "Take me there quickly." Boxing gym hall. It was empty and quiet everywhere. After Xie Haixing's death, there were no more boxing matches here. Yifeng sat casually in a seat in the audience. Liu Sandao hurriedly walked up to Yifeng and said respectfully, "Boss. Don't call me boss. I don't like that. Just call me Mr. Yi from now on." Yifeng said lightly. Chapter 23: The Young Master of the Chen Family. Although Yifeng's words were calm, to Liu Sandao he felt like a killing god. Behind this smile is a terrifying murderous intent. Especially when he thought of the scene where the other party killed Xia Haixing, Liu Sandao became more certain that the person in front of him was not an ordinary person. "Yi, Mr. Yi. I wonder if you have any instructions now that you are here?" Liu Sandao asked tentatively. Until now, he still can't figure out Yifeng's background. No one knew what this terrifying existence, who easily crushed Xia Haixing to death, was trying to do. According to his previous thoughts, it would not be a big deal to give the other party a good attitude temporarily. At least when the time comes, the Chen family will come to him. Maybe we can let this guy block it. Perhaps we can use the Chen family to try if this person has the strength to compete with the Chen family. If so, it can be a stable support. If not, then it would not be a bad thing for him, as he could blame the other party for Xia Haixing's death. This is a best of both worlds approach. I came to you for one thing. Find a few reliable people and do something with me in a few days. Yifeng said lightly. He completely ignored the little thoughts in Liu Sandao's mind if the other party did not cooperate. Yifeng doesn't mind having one more corpse here. Upon hearing this, Liu Sandao asked cautiously, "Mr. Yi, what's the matter? Don't ask questions that you shouldn't ask. You will know when the time comes." Liu Sandao was speechless and felt a little indignant, but he didn't dare to show it at all. He originally wanted to ask about the specific time, but at this moment, he heard footsteps outside, and it seemed that there were quite a few people. Out of instinct, Liu Sandao looked outside the door and saw a young man walking in. Following behind were a dozen burly men in suits, who were obviously well trained. Yifeng raised his eyebrows. The strength of this group of people was not weak, especially the young man, who had a powerful middle-aged man following him. His strength far exceeds that of the Soldier King, and he is probably much stronger than Liu Sandao, and he has no good intentions. When Liu Sandao saw the person coming, his expression changed drastically and he blurted out, "Chen Xian." The person who came was the eldest son of the Chen family, Chen Xian. Chen Xian has been holding a lot of anger these past 2 days. Xia Haixing's death has almost uprooted the Chen family's underground influence. Although it is not known whether this has caused serious damage to the huge Chen family, for the Chen family it is like having a tiger's claw cut off. This made the head of the Chen family, Lei Ting, furious, and he gave Chen Xian a death order, asking him to resolve the matter. Otherwise, his status as heir would probably be shaken. Chen Xian was dressed luxuriously and had a dignified temperament. In Liancheng, he was a very outstanding young man from an aristocratic family. The head of the Chen family has many sons, and the one who can become the designated heir is naturally no ordinary person. He strode in, saw Liu Sandao, narrowed his eyes and asked, "Liu Sandao, you killed Xia Haixing and wantonly encroached on his territory, and you still dare to be here. You really don't take my Chen family seriously." He completely ignored Yifeng on the side. In his eyes, Yifeng was just a subordinate of Liu Sandao. Upon hearing this, Liu Sandao smiled bitterly in his heart, thinking that what he feared would come true. As expected, the Chen family came to our door. "Mr. Chen, I was not the one who killed Xia Haixing." After saying that, he secretly glanced at Yifeng and found that the instigator was sitting aside with a calm expression, as calm as a mountain. Upon hearing this, Chen Xian said in a deep voice, "Liu Sandao, no matter who killed Xia Haixing, you have encroached on his territory, and this matter has something to do with you." Chen Xian naturally knew that Xia Haixing was not killed by Liu Sandao, but he needed to give an explanation to the head of the family. The only instruction was to eliminate Liu Sandao. To him, how Xia Haixing died became secondary. He had only one goal, which was to keep his position as heir and bring back Liu Sandao's head as a report. It doesn't matter whether you killed him or not. Chen Xian smiled playfully, with no intention of getting to the bottom of things with Liu Sandao. "All you need to know is that you must die today." Chen Xian spoke it almost word for word. As soon as the words fell, the air around them froze. The people brought by Chen Xian stepped forward and surrounded Liu Sandao, Yifeng, and others. The few younger brothers who followed Liu Sandao also became alert, and a war was about to break out. If a fight really breaks out, Liu Sandao has no chance of winning, as the opponent's men are obviously well-trained thugs. Moreover, the other party had more people and more power, and he didn't have any time to call anyone over. The other party had made every possible preparation and had figured out his situation before launching the attack. Liu Sandao looked a little ugly. He lowered his head to glance at Yifeng and found that the other party didn't seem to show any expression. Although he was at a disadvantage, Liu Sandao was still a man who had walked out of the fight. He did not show any fear and said in a deep voice, "Chen Xian, what are you going to do?" "Hey, why are you asking me? Get started." Chen Xian gave the order. "Wait a minute." Yifeng stretched out his hand to stop him. He was very satisfied with Liu Sandao's attitude. At least until now he had not revealed the fact that he was the one who killed Xie Haixing. Just for this reason, Yifeng looked up to him a little bit. If an ordinary person encountered this situation, he would probably have pushed Yifeng out. When Chen Xian saw someone coming out to stop them, his eyes moved to Yifeng, who was wearing light blue casual pants, a grey down jacket, and a pair of sneakers. Although it is not luxurious, if we only talk about temperament, it is slightly better than Chen Xian, and his handsomeness is beyond Chen Xian's reach. "Who do you think you are to stop me?" Chen Xian frowned, and before he could finish his words, he flew out. Yifeng grinned and responded with fists and kicks. The eldest son of the Chen family has a great reputation. Yifeng has heard of him many times before, but has never seen him in person. But it doesn't mean that Yifeng is afraid of the Chen family. The small Chen family is not enough for him to take seriously. This scene shocked everyone. Especially Liu Sandao, the eldest son of the Chen family. "Although I am not afraid, I don't dare to provoke him easily. I didn't expect to be beaten by Yifeng. Without even thinking, I kicked him away." The people brought by Chen Xian were also stunned for a moment, looking at the scene in front of them in disbelief. They are all thugs hired by the Chen family. If something happens to the young master, they will be punished when they go back to see what is happening. Especially the middle-aged man with terrifying strength at the level of a soldier king, his eyes bulged out and he stared at Yifeng intently. "Kill them all! Kill them all!" Chen Xian crawled up from the ground in a panic, with blood at the corner of his mouth, and yelled frantically at Yifeng. The Chen family is the largest family in Lianchen. As a member of the Chen family and the designated heir, when has he ever suffered such humiliation? "What are you still standing there for?" Chen Xian was so furious that he almost lost his mind, and shouted loudly at the master at the level of Soldier King. Chapter 24. You are not qualified to know my name. The priest that the Chen family had hired at a huge price immediately came to his senses and walked towards Yifeng with a gloomy face. Liu Sandao watched coldly with no intention of taking action. Now was the time to test Yifeng's strength. The Chen family's priest was a sturdy man, less than 40 years old, with a neat crew cut, and looked like a retired soldier. He was wearing a well-fitting suit, but it couldn't hide the murderous aura emanating from him. He looked calm and composed, and sneered at Yifeng, "How do you want to die?" Judging from his senses, the opponent's strength is even stronger than Liu Sandao. Such a person, no matter where he is the one that all family forces are vying for. However, in Yifeng's eyes, this level of strength is no different from that of an ant. "Tell me when you have the ability." Yifeng raised the corners of his mouth slightly and said with a friendly smile. The Chen family's priest looked a little angry when he saw this. No one had ever dared to look down on him like this. Court death. He exerted force with both feet, rushed towards Yifeng, and punched him with his fist, as if he was going to subdue Yifeng with one move. Next second. Bang! A figure flew out and slammed down towards Chen Xian. "Arr!" Chen Xian screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Chen Xian wanted to cry but had no tears at this moment. Why was I always the one who got hurt? In addition to the huge pain, there was more fear in his heart. What kind of strength does a person who can kick the family's priest away with ease have? Chen Xian didn't dare to imagine it at this time. He suddenly realized that he had kicked the steel plate today. Looking at the worshipper beside him, he was lying on the ground with a distorted face and a trace of blood vomited from his mouth. It was obvious that he had suffered serious internal injuries. The Chen family's worshipper no longer had the calm expression he had just had, and his eyes were filled with fear. In the entire Lianchen, there is almost no one who is strong enough to defeat him, let alone anyone who can knock him away so easily with just one move. Who is he? At this moment, a question arose in the minds of everyone present, including Liu Sandao. Liu Sandao originally thought that no matter how strong Yifeng was, he would suffer if he met the master sent out by the Chen family. Unexpectedly, the other party won so easily. At this moment, his doubts about Yifeng's strength disappeared instantly, and he was filled with more admiration. Several of Chen Xian's men ran over and tried to help him up, which led to another round of screams. It's broken, it's broken. Several people looked at Chen Xian's feet, which were weak and powerless. It was obvious that the huge force from the priest's attack had broken his thigh. Several of his men lifted him into the air, but they couldn't put him down or help him up. Sweat beads caused by pain mixed with cold sweat from fear kept sliding down Chen Xian's forehead. Then the men could only slowly lay him flat on the ground. Chen Xian struggled to prop up half of his body, gritted his teeth and shouted to Yifeng, "Do you know who I am? You are looking for death." Chen Xian soon paid the price for his stubbornness. Next second, Yifeng took a step forward and slapped him on the cheek without saying anything. Snap! The sound of teeth falling out and breaking could be heard clearly, making one's heart skip a beat. Ruthless person. This is the thought that comes to everyone's mind. This is a truly ruthless person. Liu Sandao was so stunned that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. He thought Yifeng was cruel enough in killing Xia Haixing, but he didn't expect that he was equally ruthless to the eldest young master of the Chen family. At this moment, he completely extinguished the last trace of doubt. Seeing this, the Chen family's worshipper weakly got up from the ground, looked at Yifeng and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Logically speaking, such a terrifying person would not appear in the small city of Lianchen. But he appeared and I met him, and with just one move he left me powerless to resist. This kind of strength is too terrifying. Although this Chen family priest had seen many masters, he had never seen such a terrifying person. "You have no right to know my name. If you don't want to die, take this garbage and get out." Yifeng pointed at Chen Xian who was wailing on the ground and said coldly. The Chen family's priest wanted to say something but stopped himself. However, thinking about Yifeng's ruthlessness, he knew that he was no match for him, so he had to give up. Walk. As the Chen family's priest waved his hand, all the people brought by Chen Xian came closer, helped Chen Xian up, and walked out. Chen Xian endured the severe pain and seemed to want to say something. However, Yifeng's attack was ruthless enough. He slapped his mouth so hard that it was crooked, his teeth fell out, and he was unable to speak. I could only make intermittent grunting sounds. The Chen family came with great force, but with little momentum, they eventually left the number 13 boxing gym in a shaky manner. Liu Sandao and Yifeng's expressions were no longer suspicious as before, but full of respect. This was a person who was completely convincing enough for him. Apart from anything else, just the ruthlessness and the courage to not take the Chen family seriously at all made Liu Sandao feel inferior to them. Although he came from the underworld, he did not dare to underestimate a giant like the Chen family, but Yifeng did not take the other party seriously at all. However, he was still a little worried, as he had completely offended the Chen family. Can we really compete with the Chen family in the future? You know, in the underworld, strength is important, but influence is more important. Although Yifeng is good at fighting, he is alone after all. Even if he adds himself, he is still not as good as the Chen family. The Chen family's power is not only underground, but also has connections in official circles. If the other party uses the power of the government to eliminate them, the consequences are hard to imagine. Yifeng saw Liu Sandao's worry. Don't worry, the small Chen family can't do anything to me. Just help me get things done and I'll keep you safe. At least you don't have to worry about the official side. Yifeng said this confidently, which gave Liu Sandao some peace of mind. Upon hearing this, Liu Sandao immediately knelt down and said solemnly and sincerely, "Mr. Yi, if you have any questions in the future, just give me the order." At this moment, Liu Sandao was completely convinced by Yifeng, and this kneeling meant that he was willing to surrender. Yifeng looked down at Liu Sandao, nodded with satisfaction, and smiled. "Very good, in this case, you should follow what I said before and select a group of outstanding and reliable people to be ready for my deployment at any time." "I'll do it right away," Liu Sandao responded in a deep voice. This time he didn't ask Yifeng what he was doing, he knew that these were not what he should ask. As a subordinate, he just needs to do his job seriously, and he is not supposed to know anything else. He must understand this truth. Get up and do it as soon as possible. I will notify you when the time comes. If the Chen family comes to trouble you again, you can notify me and I will deal with them. Yi Feng said this lightly, and his expression did not show that he cared about the Chen family at all. The fact is that Yi Feng really didn't take the Chen family seriously if he was willing to use the power of the Shenju guards. The Chen family can be destroyed in a snap. Shen's Huwei is the stabilizing force and should not be easily deployed unless it is absolutely necessary. The mobilization will have too great an impact and will affect the nerves of many people. Liu Sandao naturally didn't know all this, but Yi Feng's calm expression and powerful strength gave him enough confidence. Chapter 25, Ruthless. Upon hearing this, Liu Sandao said in a resounding voice, "Yes, Mr. Yi. Okay, I won't stay here any longer." After saying that, he waved and walked outside. Liu Sandao hurriedly stood up to see him off. After going outside, Yi Feng got on the electric scooter that was almost old from Luo Yang's family and left slowly. Liu Sandao at the back twitched his mouth. Mr. Yi drives a small electric scooter like this? I was secretly thinking whether I should give Mr. Yi a good car that matches his status. Bang. Inside the Chen family villa, Chen Hong slammed the table and stood up, looking at Chen Xian, who was wailing and angrily cursed, "Waste, you can't even deal with a little Liu Sandao. Dad, that Liu Sandao doesn't have much strength. We can definitely take him down with our strength. But a ruthless person suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and even Wan Gongsheng is no match for him." Chen Xian hurriedly explained. Chen Hong suppressed his anger, turned around and looked at the Chen family priest, and asked in a deep voice, "Guo, tell me, what is going on?" The Chen family's worshipper named Wan Guo coughed violently, then slowly said, "Master, this matter is indeed not the fault of the young master, that ruthless person is indeed extraordinary. It has been basically confirmed that Xia Haixing was killed by the other party. Wan Guo is still frightened by Yi Feng's kick. His blood is boiling and he is seriously injured. He had seen many martial arts masters, many of whom were stronger than himself, but none of them could knock him away with one kick. There are definitely not many people who are still so young and promising. Perhaps only those martial arts sects that have kept themselves hidden from the world and the young disciples of martial arts families have such strength." Wan Guo couldn't help but guess Yi Feng's identity, and at the same time explained it to Chen Hong in detail. After listening to Wan Guo's narration, Chen Hong's expression gradually became solemn. As a worshipper of the Chen family, Wan Guo has a high status, and Chen Hong usually treats him with great respect. His words are naturally trustworthy. Could it be that the ruthless man really has some amazing identity? As the head of the Chen family, Chen Hong is still cautious, if it is really as Wan Guo said. The Chen family really needs to think carefully about what to do next. Although he was not a martial artist, he was in a high position and had heard about the strength of martial arts families. If the other party is really the successor of a martial arts sect, or a disciple from a noble family somewhere, he really didn't dare to pursue the matter further. The Chen family could not bear the wrath from such a huge force. Thinking of this, Chen Hong regained his usual calmness and said to Wan Guo, "Let's put this matter aside for now and find out more first. Remember, don't alarm the other party, and don't start a conflict blindly." Chen Hong explained again. Wan Guo nodded. "Okay, go down first and take this idiot to the hospital." After saying that, he rubbed his forehead, looking a little anxious. Wan Guo hurriedly called a few of his men to carry Chen Xian away. Xia Haixing was killed and the underground power of the Chen family was eradicated. This was no secret in Lianqin, a place like a fish pond. However, many people don't know what happened, they only know that a ruthless person appeared in Lianqin recently. Not only were the Chen family's underground forces eradicated, but even the Chen family's eldest son, Chen Xian, suffered a great loss and has been bedridden in a hospital. This news was like a torpedo, causing waves to surge throughout Lianqin. What kind of existence is the Chen family? As the number one family in Lianqin, they have occupied Lianqin for decades, and no one has ever dared to touch them over the years. This legendary ruthless man not only touched the Chen family, but also knocked out one of their tiger teeth, leaving the Chen family afraid to say a word. However, Yi Feng's identity has always been a mystery. Only some sporadic rumors have spread among the Chen family, saying that he is a ruthless person. In the entire Lianqin, the person who was most nervous about Yi Feng's appearance apart from the Chen family, was undoubtedly the one-eyed dragon who had been entrenched in Lianqing for decades. The one-eyed man's real name is Liu Baoxin. He is a native of Lianqing. It is said that he worked abroad in his early years. Later, for some unknown reason, one of his eyes was injured and he returned to Lianqing to settle down. With his rich experience in the underworld and ruthless tactics, he quickly gained a foothold and became one of the big bosses in Lianqing. He is the most senior underworld boss in Lianqing. Even the Chen family has to give him some face and dare not provoke him easily. However, in recent years, the one-eyed dragon seems to have no interest in fighting in the martial arts world and has restrained his former aggressiveness. However, Xie Haixing's death still left him with a profound impact. 2 days have passed, and the one-eyed dragon has been sending people to investigate Yi Feng's background, but Liu Sandao has done a good job of keeping it confidential. There was no clue at all, and apart from the information leaked by the Chen family, there was no extra gain. In the old city of Lianqing, there is a huge old-style villa with many guards stationed outside. This is the lair of the one-eyed dragon. He has lived here for many years and has never moved. Perhaps one-eyed dragon is a nostalgic person. Although a luxurious villa area has been developed in Lianqing this year, he still prefers this place. The villa is decorated in a classical style with an antique flavor. It does not have the superficial luxury of Western decorations, but instead has a classical bookish scent. Xiaolan, have you found out the other party's background? A one-eyed old man sat on a chair in the study, playing with a string of Buddhist beads in his hand, and asked a young girl in front of him. This one-eyed old man is the one-eyed dragon who is famous in Lianqing. And that girl was none other than Xiaolan, the girl who witnessed the entire process of Xie Haixing being killed at the number 13 boxing gym that day. At the same time, she is also the only daughter of the one-eyed man. Liu Xiaolan frowned and said, "Dad, there is still no news." After Liu Xiaolan met Yi Feng that day, she also sent people to investigate, but there was still no news. Originally, he wanted to start the investigation through Qingqing's so-called classmates, but it was still confusing. It seemed as if the other party suddenly appeared in Lianqing, leaving people completely confused. Send someone to continue investigating secretly. Remember, do not have any conflict with the other party or Liu Sandao. If you can't find out anything, forget it. No matter how deep a fish hides, it will surface one day. The one-eyed man still had that calm expression. The reason why the one-eyed dragon has been able to occupy Lianqing for decades without falling is not only because he possesses powerful strength, but more importantly, he is able to remain calm and judge the situation. This is the secret that has enabled him to overcome difficulties many times. Although new forces have emerged, the one-eyed dragon will not easily become their enemy. Whether it was Xie Haixing or Liu Sandao before, or the mysterious and ruthless man who appeared inexplicably now. He only wanted to know the other party's background and had no intention of making enemies. He would only deliver a fatal blow when the other party was weak.